Good evening. Today is January 28th, Thursday night. It is 7:02. My name is Helen Picard, and I will begin chairing the school committee meeting, and I call this meeting to order. And if you'd all join me and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I would remind everyone to silence their devices and let you know that this meeting is being recorded. Before I continue with the agenda, I will read the governor's order. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the North Andover School Committee may be conducted via remote participation by some or all committee members and staff. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website, www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to hear the meeting may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 99 or Verizon Channel 28, or at www.northandovercam.org. No in-person attendance of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite our best efforts, we will post on the school department website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible. I do want to mention that tonight we will have a public hearing. This is a meeting within the meeting, and that will take place midway through the agenda. Those who wish to join us can click on the link that's on the agenda that says public hearing, and it will take you to a document that will give you instructions on how to join the meet. You may do so with your face, as I'm doing now. You may do so with phone if you don't happen to have a Google account, and you will be put into a waiting room, and that waiting room will have anyone waiting admitted when we've opened the public hearing. Ms. Mabley will be our producer for that portion of tonight's programming. So if you are waiting in the public hearing right now, you can watch this show. You will need to mute this meeting when you're in the public hearing because it is a separate meet. So I'll remind people of that, and we'll go over the expectations for the public hearing when we get there. But if you are spinning in the waiting room, that is because we have not opened that meeting yet, and you can just leave that spinning while you watch the rest of the meeting. I hope that's clear for people. And our first order of business is public comment. So I have one public comment by email, and should I forget in the moment, I also have a comment for the public hearing that I will read during the public hearing that came by email. So this is from Leah Caller at 85 Lancaster Road. I would like to write again to you in regards to our children in North Andover Public Schools. I truly feel our town would benefit from school choice, meaning have the option to send your child in full-time or stay fully remote, as other surrounding towns and states have implemented. I feel as if we have good framework, especially now that teachers, at least from what I have seen in my children's first and third grade classrooms, are getting the hang of teaching remote and in-person students. Has there been any more discussion around getting kids back in full-time or even 4 days a week? What if we started with another survey of NAPS parents to see who wants full in-person and who would stay remote? That could help with numbers and may be more doable than you think with spacing. What are the thoughts around going to 3-foot rule while keeping masks on, obviously, and hygiene focus? What is the district thinking for a concrete plan for the rest of this school year? Thanks as always for your time. I'm hoping we can work towards more in-person learning, especially for the elementary kids. We are struggling in so many different ways. Thank you, Leah. And now I am moving on to the document generated by the form that folks have been using to write in. And I would remind the public that we would welcome your voice into this meeting. You have the option to have us call you during the meeting, which we've had a couple of people do since the summertime. But people might get tired of hearing me read. So our next public comment is from Lisa Meldrum at 1444 Salem Street. And she writes, on behalf of North Andover Public School parents in every nook of the system, we'd like to request more communication and transparency about the action items crossing his desk. Use your Twitter account for nothing else, for real issues and updates, not just basketball games and ice sculptures. For example, did NAPS choose to participate in the COVID pool testing? Tell us these things. Thank you. Our next public comment is from Lauren McGreehan at 15 Wayland Circle, and writes, now that we have hit the halfway point of the school year, I'd like to know what the plans are to get students in person more often. At Sargent, we were told in November during a PTO meeting with Ms. Leahy that the district was making plans to bring cohorts in every other Wednesday. But this wouldn't happen until February. The in-person days have gone well, and it is obvious they can be done safely. We all recognize that our students benefit academically, socially, and emotionally when they attend school. Why haven't we heard anything regarding the second half of the school year? Our next public comment is from Andrea. Andrea doesn't give her last name, but it looks like maybe her last name is Grillo at 3 Walker Road. I'm guessing that from the email address, although that's not always the case. At 3 Walker Road. And her comment, will OLA be offered for the 2021-2022 school year? My son is on the autism spectrum, and this change has really affected him. He has already stated he no longer wants to go back to school in person, and it's going to be very hard for myself and other families like ours to get their special needs children back in buildings. Is there any plan to accommodate those children who simply refuse to go back due to such a massive change in schedule and environment? Thank you. The next comment is from Abby Murphy at 96 Amberville Road in North Andover. If teachers receive vaccinations, will North Andover Public Schools consider making plans to bring students back to school, specifically younger grades who are suffering greatly from lack of in-person education? Does North Andover Public Schools have any plans to resurvey families of students to ask whether or not they feel hybrid is working for their child? Whether or not they would send their students back to school full-time if that were an option? How is North Andover Public Schools assessing the effectiveness of hybrid across the grades? What are the unions asking for once teachers are vaccinated that is holding back North Andover Public Schools from returning 5 days of in-person learning for their students? And this is the last one via the forum. It's from Ina. Also doesn't give a last name, but I'm guessing from the email address that it might be Franco at 39 Village Green Drive. And the question is, at what circumstances kids will be able to have full day in person at kindergarten 2021/22 school year? What chances are? How many kindergartners are attending school this year versus the start of the 2020-2021 accepting OLA? Thank you. So I'm sorry, I'm a little tongue-tied tonight, and I find those years a little bit hard to say because they're consecutive numbers and feels a little confusing to me. Okay, that's the end of our public comment section, and our next agenda item is the consent agenda and the approval of minutes. So, I'm sorry, I didn't do roll call, so we should probably pause here and do that. I'm not the only person here. I can't see the room right now from where I am. Oh, now I can see the room. So when I call your name, please answer in the affirmative. Mr. Teresi.
Here.
Ms. Mabley.
Here.
Ms. Lynch.
Here.
Mr. McDevitt.
Here.
On the line, I see Eamon O'Carroll.
Here.
And Dr. Gilligan, I'll have you introduce your crowd.
On the line, I see Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, Lorene Marks.
Here.
Executive Director of Special Education, Marcy Bacuzzi.
Here.
And present in the room, Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations, Dr. Jim Mealy. Here.
Okay, is there anybody that we failed to call? Okay, terrific. Sorry about that. Thank you so much for your patience with me. So we have our consent agenda, and I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as printed in the packet.
So I'll move to approve the minutes as presented in the packet for January 14th, 2021.
Second.
So I heard it was moved by Mr. McDevitt and seconded by Ms. Lynch. Is that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you, and we'll have a roll call vote starting with Mr. Teresi.
Aye.
Ms. Mabley?
Aye.
Ms. Lynch?
Aye.
Mr. McDevitt?
Aye.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you very much. And we're on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Gilligan? Nope.
Students
We're
report.
on to the students' report. Mr. O'Carroll.
Thank you. Good evening. So Mika is not here tonight. She had a student council related conflict and she gives her apologies. To start off, I thought I wanted to make it feel a bit more like old times. So I wanted to highlight some of the athletic accomplishments currently at the high school. So we have 3 teams currently with winning records. That would be the boys skiing team, the girls skiing team, and the girls gymnastics team. And of those, the girls gymnastics team and the girls skiing team both have undefeated records. Moving on from that, there are a number of fundraisers going on at the high school currently or have finished recently. So one of them, if you have children in high school, you may have heard of this, the Stop the Beeb fundraiser, which student council for every 5-minute period between classes has continually played Justin Bieber's former hit, Baby. It's a very catchy song, but catchy in the worst way possible. And they're doing this in order to raise money for the United Way of Merrimack Valley Fund for COVID relief. And as of this morning, they have raised $466. Some have called it extortion. I wouldn't go that far, but it's definitely working. Also, the sophomore class recently held a fundraiser selling Rebecca's Nut-Free Cookies, which, if you're not familiar, you purchase cookies from a catalog and then they're distributed to you by the class officers, and they're prepackaged and frozen, and so they're ready to eat. I would recommend their Snickerdoodles. The Interact Club has been holding a fundraiser starting now through May or April, I believe, and what they're trying to do is sell trees for $5 a piece, and they want to sell 250 trees to offset some of the paper use at the high school. And what you do is when you purchase it, you can either have it planted in your lawn, or I believe they are exploring options to plant them around town if you don't necessarily have a lawn to plant it in, or if you just don't want to plant it in your lawn. So I think that's a fantastic fundraiser. Now on to the new schedule. Since it's been 2 weeks since we last spoke, we've gotten a chance to experience the new schedule with the 20 minutes of live streaming class when you are on your asynchronous day. So I thought I would give you some thoughts that some of my peers have had in experiencing this new schedule. So it's a mixed bag, I would say. There are some classes, lecture-based, note-based classes, where 20 minutes works great. It's designed well for those classes because it's not as interactive so much as it's taking in information. But in a class like a foreign language or world language class, you don't necessarily have that level of taking in information. It's much more interactive, and so it's more difficult to use the 20-minute live streaming block to teach effectively. Something common among the students I spoke to is that we noticed with teachers who prior to the state mandate didn't live stream classes, there was visible stress in them trying to make the 20 minutes work. And as Mika and I spoke to the other week, it is definitely something that requires a level of planning, preparation, and practice to keep people engaged. So we empathize with them, and it is mandated, it's here to stay, but it's difficult, and that's important to point out. Now, one thing that I don't know if I necessarily agree, but I think there's a general feeling that the 20 minutes can feel like an interruption to your asynchronous work. So if you have the 60-minute block where you have an asynchronous class, it feels like you have your 20 minutes at the start, then you have 40 minutes to get some work done, and it doesn't feel like you are as productive as you could be. Now, these are general feelings, and for that reason, student council and student ambassadors have collaborated to create a Google Form survey, which will be sent out to every high school student next Wednesday, I believe. And then every student will have the opportunity to respond to a series of questions along with some short answer where they can provide their feelings. And hopefully this will give a much clearer picture of where the student body lies. I just tried to give an overview of where people are. That is what I have for you tonight. Are there any questions?
So we'll go around and we'll start with Mr. Teresi.
No, thank you very much.
Ms. Mabley?
Thank you for the great report and for pursuing the feedback on how things are going with the new setup. I appreciate that. Look forward to hearing more.
Ms. Lynch?
No questions, and thank you.
And Mr. McDevitt?
Just two quick questions. One, when you do the survey, I'm wondering if one of the questions can be very clear what year the student is, because I think, as you mentioned, Damon, some of the seniors who may have longer classes or AP classes, their teachers have been live streaming, a little bit longer than some of the others, and I think you might find some different results with some of the underclassmen compared to the upperclassmen. And the other thing which I think is great is, I'm a fan of the tree planting, and I'm just wondering if two quick questions. One, is that coordinated with DPW at all? And then my second is, can I just plant like a number of trees at Mr. Teresi's house?
Only if you come sing Baby at the house, you can.
Okay.
It is collaborating with the town a little bit, the town arborist, so you got that
Okay.
there. As for singing, you might be able to hire the school's choir to do that.
Okay. As long as it's outside. Okay, awesome, thank you.
I do have a couple of questions. Following up on Mr. McDevitt's suggestion, I would suggest that you have a question on your survey. Was your teacher or were your teachers live streaming before January 19th? Because then you get that bit of information. But I'm also wondering what you're going to be doing with this data.
So I am not actively involved in the compilation of the survey, but I can pass along both of your suggestions for questions. And I believe from my general knowledge that it's going to be first reviewed by the administration, and I'm not sure what they will then do with it. So I think that's a better question to ask of them.
Okay, because I know, these guidelines came down from DESE, so it might make sense to share whatever information you gather with DESE. Of course, this committee would be interested, but as you say, these guidelines come from DESE, so we can't say, okay, well, let's switch back to 10 minutes, or let's only do it in classes that are, set up in this way. And we do hope, like you, that as teachers practice this and as students practice this, everybody gets better at doing it together. So thank you so much. You're welcome to stay with us, and you're welcome to go.
Thank you, and stay warm this weekend.
Yeah, it's supposed to be Arctic.
Thank you, we will. Okay, so our next agenda item is the superintendent's report. So I turn it over to you, Dr. Gilligan.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Finance Committee for having myself, Dr. Mealy, and Chair Picard to present this past Tuesday night. It was a great opportunity to connect with them, and we really appreciated that opportunity. Secondly, today, the COVID task force met this afternoon, and North Andover has gone from red to yellow. So that was a positive change, and I thought of particular import to mention. Additionally, Cheryl Bozak, and I'll have her here next time for the superintendent's report. Her, along working with Caroline Ibbotson and Brian LaGrasse and our COVID team, she has put in all the appropriate paperwork for pool testing and surveillance and the possibility for North Andover to do it. And at this point, they're exploring the pros and the cons and the benefits of, what it may provide North Andover. And is it something that we should be doing? So I'll have her next week. Again, she has all the applications in and taking a look at, those benefits, if it's, beneficial to do so and best for the district. Next up, in the superintendent's report tonight, you will see a letter from 22 local superintendents and the presidents of the unions to the governor of Massachusetts, asking to categorize educators in phase 1. Currently, they're in phase 2, step 3. Working with our local officials, we were pretty excited to think that our educators would have an opportunity to receive the vaccine, probably the 3rd week of February, and we were planning sites to do so. Dr. Mealy and I have been meeting with town officials, and it looks like at this point, that may be backed up a bit as the town, will probably be receiving about 100 a week, Jim, I think was the number. And we were anticipating a big number to get our educators vaccinated. And I think that's a big step. And it would be a positive step for our school district to have conversations and lead to conversations about what things could look like later this spring. Also of great import, I will have Ms. Marks talk in a second about, though, our priority to bring back first and second graders, an additional day a week. And Ms. Marks, do you want to talk about that, what we're exploring with that at this time?
Great.
Sure.
Move
Like
on to-
Dr. Gilligan said, we are exploring
I
bringing
wanted to ask a
back.
question about the vaccination first.
Okay.
Madam Chair, do you mind if I ask the superintendent a question about the vaccination letter?
No, I think that's fine. We should probably
Yeah,
have a
before you-
go-around for everybody then.
So what I've been reading in the newspaper about some of the first people to get vaccinated, especially first responders, it seems like a lot of the first responders don't want to get the vaccine. I think I read like 45 or 50%. So I'm wondering, again, we're all reading different stuff in the newspapers, but I think it may be beneficial if we could find out maybe for the union to poll their members, like what's the percentage of our teachers that, once I can get it, I'll get it the next day. But I'm wondering, like, that may be an added benefit or an added argument to allow them to go in. If you allow teachers to go in this the next phase, and I could say 95% of them are going to get the vaccine, because it seems to me what I've been reading is there's a lot of vaccine that's being unused. And we're putting stuff aside, but if the governor knew that, say, 90 or 95% of the teachers were willing to take it, that's an added argument. So, again, it's a friendly suggestion maybe to ask our union leadership to ask their membership, poll their membership to see how many people would take the vaccine. Because, anyone read the Globe today, there were so many stories about people who aren't taking the vaccine, don't want to take the vaccine, and there's other people who are like, I'm desperate to take the vaccine, but I can't get to it. So that would be just my suggestion. I think it would carry a lot more weight if the governor knew that a lot of our teachers are ready to take it the next day.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think Dr. Mealy can speak a little bit to it because we were planning on gathering information for mid-February. Jim?
Yeah, so it's a great point, Dave, because we were looking to send something out to poll and see how many, just so we would have the numbers lined up. But we were waiting until we had a little bit better idea when the vaccine was going to take place. But given what you just said, it makes sense to find out those numbers now. And we can still follow up with the communication once we have some more information, and it includes instructions and things like that. But yeah, we can certainly do that.
And not to get too far in front of ourselves, but do you envision like our school nurses giving the vaccine to the teachers at the schools? Because that would seem to would just cut out a lot of the, again, I haven't had it yet, but what I've read is like these vaccination sites, it's been tough to get people to go and get people to sign up. And our school nurses probably are more than capable of giving these vaccination shots in our schools.
Yeah, so there's a lot of discussion around it, and what we are envisioning right now is utilizing the field house, like we did with testing. It worked out really well.
Yep.
You can come in and go out of different doors, plenty of room, because unlike the testing, you need to stick around for 15 minutes after you get it. So we have to have
Right.
space for people to be distant. As far as who does it, I don't know if our nurses do or not, but if they're able to, then they can certainly be part of that as well. And then it's when, because one thing that it looks like is happening is the first shot, people aren't having much of a reaction to, but the second shot, if they're going to have a reaction,
Right.
it's been that, and it's like a day where they're just kind of out of commission. And so we're thinking we should do a Friday when we do it, so that we're not losing people for the next day. So those are all the things we're talking about.
So you might have remembered that I was a pretty strong advocate about the kids going back to school. I don't know if you remember that or not. But I just think that if we get the teachers vaccinated as soon as possible, man, we get so many kids back in school. It'd give them a lot of confidence. It'd give the parents a lot of confidence. So anything that we can do to help, I'm all in.
Yeah, we're definitely, trying to get it done as soon as possible, and that's the purpose of the letter. But anything that's going to help the strength of that letter, we're all for.
Yeah, and it would be our nurses that would help with the vaccine. I mean, we had a site locally at the field house where we thought we could do mass vaccinations of all staff over a period of time.
We could knock it out in one day.
Very
We've
quickly.
done the math.
And, and we've been working with Brian and Caroline Ibertson, and Cheryl Bozak, and we've been pretty excited about the ability to vaccinate that many people. And to hear the news, I just really kind of today, that it would be about 100 a week that our municipality would receive,
Yeah.
was disappointing. So at the same time, I think it is critical if we're going to look to the future and have something look different in the spring with that vaccination. We want folks to get it. So
At the same time, towards the end of getting as many as we can, as soon as we can, on that task force call, the town manager mentioned that we might be partnering with the regional district, because they're going to be able to process, and we process in thousands. And if we can do that, then we can get it done even quicker.
That's like that super site Danvers.
Exactly.
Middleton site? Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
Like Gillette Stadium, I think Fenway Park, I think there's going to be one up
But
at
the one up here is at that Double Tree. or
Double
whatever.
Tree.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
So any of the super centers that we can partner with, those are the conversations we've had with our folks. But certainly, I think that if the Commissioner, Jeff Riley, and Governor Baker could think about this a little bit more, I think it would be important to our educators and to all of our students.
That's for sure.
Thank you.
On that note,
So let me just check through, Dr. Gilligan, is there anybody else in the committee who wants to ask any questions about vaccinations? Ms. Lynch,
No, thank you.
Mr. McDevitt,
No, thanks.
and Ms. Mably?
All set, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Gilligan.
well, on that note, I think we've had a lot of success locally, in terms of our mitigation strategies and having kids come to school within the hybrid. There's a lot of places locally that haven't been into school at all since prior to Thanksgiving. They've just started up again this week. So we're excited to get the vaccination and think about the possibilities with that. But at the same time, I'm going to have Ms. Marks talk about how we want to prioritize additional time in school for first and second grade as our youngest learners. And I'd ask Assistant Superintendent Marks to talk about that now. Lorene?
Okay. I think I'm going to do something else first, just because Eamon has rejoined the meeting, and I know he's busy. He's got a lot of work to do, so I don't want to hold him up too much. But I just wanted to recognize Eamon, some of his fellow students, and some of our teachers who presented a class on Saturday called Hidden Histories. It's part of a 3-part series. So in the summer, really due to all the racial issues, the social justice issues that were going on, some of our students, past and present, reached out to Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Tracy, some other staff members, and just wanted to talk about how the curriculum in North Andover could better prepare our students to participate intellectually and actively in our society and the issues that are going on in our society. So Mr. Sheehy, who has always been pretty innovative, wrote a grant and partnered with the National Parks Foundation and the Essex National Heritage Foundation, and they have put together this course. So Saturday was the first session, and I happened to attend. We had about 4 or 5 teachers from North Andover who attended. Our school committee chair attended, and some of our students, including Eamon, attended via a video example of some teaching strategies. So the first class was on the Irish and the Latinx immigration in Lawrence, and I thought the class was absolutely fabulous. There were about 80 people who signed up, and students that have, many I know from Race Amity, but students who've been part of the group for a few years included Eamon and Supraja, Anika, and who else have we got? Sharuti, and then Linnea, is that it? Is that correct? Linnea, thanks, Eamon. And they were fabulous. They actually were able to model this inquiry looking at primary source documents. And the comments from the other teachers who attended, they were just amazed at what the kids were doing and amazed at the relationship the students had with one another and with the teacher. So it was an excellent class. Again, I was so proud of our students. They were amazing to volunteer to be presented like that in a new light in front of a lot of people that they don't know. And it was really gratifying to see some of our staff attend as well and participate in the event. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And thank you, Eamon, and thank you for coming back into the meeting.
If I can put my 2 cents worth in as well, in addition to the piece that they did for the training itself, they did a piece to promote the class as well. So these students put in a couple of video things, and the prep work for the class was rigorous and interesting. I mean, there was at least probably 6 hours of asynchronous learning we did before we had our synchronous learning. And we also did breakout rooms to have small group work and interactions with all primary source materials. So it's really stunning, and what the other educators said from around the region, how pleased they were for the opportunity to be there. So Mr. Sheehy, if you're watching, or if you watch at some point, thank you so much for responding so well to our student request. And Eamon, thank you and your peers for really asking for more. It was a very interesting experience, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the series. Thank you, Ms. Marks. Thank you, Eamon.
Thanks.
You can go again, Eamon. I promise not to call you back.
Thank you.
All right, and now I will just speak to what Dr. Gilligan was talking about regarding first and second grade students. So as he mentioned, we are exploring the option of bringing first and second grade students back to school on Wednesdays. There have been concerns shared about the amount of screen time for these young students, the need to develop the foundational skills that math and literacy that are difficult to connect with and develop remotely. In addition, teachers have talked about the concerns or challenges that they have doing a fully synchronous day on Wednesday with kids that are that young. So it's something that we're looking at. We're looking at all the ins and outs. I mean, it's not a simple process. There's lots to it. But we have begun those conversations and raising questions about that. As we explore that possibility, it's important to know that kids would still remain cohorted. The safety piece is still a primary concern. We would still be looking at the 6-foot distance, masking, hand washing, all of those types of safety concerns. And it's also important to know that this would have to be bargained with the union. So all those pieces are part of the consideration. But it is something that we're looking at, and those are the reasons why we've chosen to look at first and second grade is our first priority.
Great, thank you,
So-
Ms. Marks.
When,
We
when
probably
would you
should have a
expect that
go
to
around
start?
with questions on that.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Ms. Lynch.
Sounded to me like Ms. Lynch needed to be recognized.
When would you like to start that?
We don't have a definite date in mind because, as I said, we're exploring the option. There are a lot of issues that we have to look at and determine whether it's feasible.
And Mr. Teresi?
So you might have heard that I'm interested in getting more kids back in the classroom if possible.
Heard that.
No, I know this isn't easy. There's a lot of moving parts, and we get a lot of emails and requests from parents. You know, not from, I don't email, I just tell you. So I'm all in favor of doing as much as you can. And I think it's just important to remember that, you know, this is not easy. And if you look around to other districts, you know, nearby, I'd like to think we're probably the district that's been in school the most in person than anyone else in the area. So I know you guys are working hard. I'm just gonna ask you to keep on working hard to get it done, because parents want it, the kids want it. I mean, get to 3rd and 4th grade, please.
Thank you, Mr. Teresi. Mr. McDevitt?
I mean, I think Mr. Tracy said most of what I was going to say. I think the other thing that I would just recommend is we should put a date out there, right? And maybe it's not a public date right now, but, and I'm just going to arbitrarily kind of say this, maybe when we come back from February vacation, right? And in order to do that, what are all the steps that have to take place in order for that to happen? Because if we don't have a start date in mind, then it's going to be March, and we're going to say, all right, so we've got a couple more logistics to figure out, and then it's going to be April, and then it's going to be over, right? So if we could put a line in the sand internally inside the central office building and say, let's back it up. We've got to negotiate with the union. We've got to worry about logistics for transportation and lunches and how we're doing classroom coverage and, all of that to keep the cohorts. If we don't plan for this, and I'm sure that you have it and probably don't want to say right now, but let's make sure that date is there, and then let's start working. Let's start working hard towards that. We owe these kids this.
Thank you, Mr. McDevitt. Ms. Mably?
So to add something, not repeat, so you said you're looking at Wednesdays and keeping the cohorts. Do you have any more vision on how that would work? You would have, I don't know, would you move into different rooms? Like how would you do that? You're saying like bring the whole, Mr. McDevitt's grade 2 back at once, but you have to keep 6 foot. So I'm just curious what you're envisioning, or are you not ready to say that?
Well, I'm not ready to go into a lot of detail, but that is one of the options that we're exploring. And if we did that, we would be looking at having them in separate rooms. So cohort A would be in one room, cohort B would be in one room from Ms. Marks's class.
Yep.
And we would have to look at staffing, and we have some ideas around that, including some thoughts about how we would focus on those foundational academic skills as well as some of the social emotional skills. So we have lots of ideas, but it's not something that we're ready to put out totally publicly yet.
I fully understand that it's hard to, I know you want to under-promise and over-deliver, which is, I totally agree with that and appreciate that, and I do want to echo Mr. McDevitt saying, I know you probably have a date in mind, and you're not ready to say it, but as soon as you are ready to say it, that would be really good.
And what I'm hearing is Mr. McDevitt has volunteered to sub if someone's out with Mr. McDevitt's classroom. He'll be adjoining with Miss Marks next door.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I'm qualified to teach first or second grade at this point.
Thank you very much.
So my request would probably be for Mr. Mealy, which is to reiterate that our cleaning protocols take place daily, and that having students in the building on a Wednesday would not in any way compromise our cleaning protocols.
I concur. It would be just another day of the custodians disinfecting the building as they do every day.
Okay, and we already have students in on Wednesdays anyway, right? We have some students who are in cohort D that are in on Wednesdays, so it's not going to impact those parts of our school protocols.
We're already doing it because even if the students aren't in, there are staff that are in, so we're already doing it.
Right.
So that's wonderful, thank you. And I know I've heard you say that before, but I just felt like the public could probably hear that again. And I'm sure I speak for myself and Mr. McDevitt that we're ready to enter negotiations at the soonest possibility that it's reasonable to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we look forward to it, and we do have cohort D in on Wednesdays. We have staff teaching from the buildings, and we have K in preschool in. And I became very keenly aware of that the other night with the ice in the morning, talking with DPW, thinking about just a small section of people that were in, but nonetheless, still something to consider. So that's our hope. Our hope is to continue to advocate with the governor and the commissioner on the vaccine. I think that opens up a lot more options later this spring at different levels. If we can get our staff vaccinated, I'm looking forward to this plan for grades 1 and 2, exploring that. And then, like all of us, we really want to be back in the fall and a full regular return to school in the fall. So we're looking forward to it. And that is it, I believe, for the superintendent's report.
Okay, are there any other questions from the committee on the superintendent's report? I'm just going to listen for your voices. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the chair's report. Linked to the agenda is a letter from our town manager with regards to the separately budgeted items with COVID recovery. So I will assume that the committee members have read that. It was discussed at the FinCom meeting earlier this week. So if anybody has any questions about those, we could discuss them now, and I'll listen for your voices if there's anything about that letter you want to discuss.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I did not see the FinCon meeting on Tuesday night.
Yep.
I'm just wondering if maybe yourself or Dr. Mailer, Dr. Gilligan could give a little rehash of that and talk about what they were talking as far as, I look at the town manager's letter and, to the sense here, I've warned of the dire finances of FY 2022. I'm just wondering, was there any discussion of, how revenues are coming in for FY 21 and what her projections are for FY 22? If there could be like a little recap of that, would be helpful, I think.
Sure thing. I'm going to turn to Dr. Mealy or Dr. Gilligan.
Yeah, so they had reviewed the FY21 revenues and indicated that while things like meals tax, which is not a surprise, are down, there were a couple that were down, but overall, revenues are projecting just as they were budgeted for 21. 22 is still an unknown, but there's also some additional, the Amazon permits are anticipated, which would help refill free cash because the town manager has some plans, including the money that you'll see is being set aside for the school department for any COVID expenses beyond what was covered in the CARES Act funding and the grant that we received for this year would come from free cash. But there's some things coming from free cash. The Amazon money would bring that back in. And so they're still not sure what the revenues will be for next year, and they're being conservative in those projections. And that's why the town manager is still asking for 2.3% overall
Right.
budget increase, but 2.5 for the school department.
So I don't want to assume anything, but when we met as a tri-board on December 14th, the town manager did not put any kind of Amazon money into the revenue forecast. People remember the new growth expectation, it was it was $650,000 across the board that she put. So is she now so
No,
she's not prepared to do that yet?
No, it's not going in the revenue forecast. It's just anticipated that it will be there, and if it does.
What's the difference between anticipating money and having a
Well,
revenue forecast?
I mean, it's when we project revenue
Sure.
amounts, we have a high level of confidence on that because it's something that happens every year. This, there could be a delay in the project that pushes it into the next year. So this is not something that you would budget as a definitive revenue income. You have to assume that if it's going to happen, then it's going to go into free cash, and then it's available after that for the following year because you can use it from free cash to do
Yeah,
something.
That's always been my problem with that, though.
Yeah.
Another question, maybe you could answer. And again, I hate to put you on the spot. These are questions probably, with the town manager, the finance director was here. Are they anticipating? Because obviously we have a big free cash balance right now. Right now it's like over $12 million.
No,
I have that worst case scenario page that is, she presented this. Do you want to look at it? It was helpful.
But is she anticipating, because I just saw the headlines in the paper today, in the Globe and in the local paper, the Trib, that, the governor just before his budget the other day, and he's planning on using one-time revenue for operating expenses. He's going to take money out of the rainy day fund. That's his proposal. Obviously, it's going to the House and the Senate. But using one-time revenue for that, because one-time revenue, whether it's the rainy day fund or in our case free cash, is the result of, underestimating revenue and estimating expenses.
Right.
That's how you get the free cash.
So that's where and when you're using it for one-time expenses, not to increase the operating budget, but that's where the 2.6 million.
I'm sorry, can I just stop you there, Jim? Because this
Yep.
is where I get a little frustrated, because we always do this. Every year, we overestimate what our expenses are, underestimate our revenue, and that's why we have, as Amy, Ms. Maley sent me, like almost $11 million in free cash right now. So if you always do that, it's not one-time revenue. If it comes in every single year, that's what gets me going on the fact that we can't take some money and put it to the schools. Because we're asking, as we talked about last week, we're asking for $1 million more than the town manager wants to provide us.
Mhm. So it's certainly not an argument, because when we were looking to go to 4.5% last year, I was saying the same exact things you're saying right
Yep.
now. The difference is that it is now free cash, and once it's free cash, that's a completely different story. You could make an argument that you could take that money and increase your operating budget if you were anticipating that years after that are going to be high enough to maintain it. That's an argument that you could make. But for right now, the amount of free cash is it's going to be drawn down.
I get that. But
According
that is the argument I want to make, because I do believe Amazon is coming here. I think she expects Amazon to come here. I think she really expects Amazon to be delivering millions of dollars to this town. So even if FY22 numbers, revenue numbers, were below the benchmarks, which, everything I read, and I know we're getting a lot of local aid, but, the lottery executive director just came out and said that lottery numbers are the roof, which is the biggest driver of local aid. I read that, the Boston Fed chief, Eric Rosengard, said that he expects, the economy to start taking off in the fall again, when people come out of the hibernation, or whatever you want to call this. So I guess I'm a little disappointed. I mean, I think this letter, while I appreciate her effort to explain her point of view, I don't think this is a point of view I know this is not a point of view that I share. And if we go by this, it's just going to keep us back. So, again, my thank yous to the town manager for explaining this, but to me, sorry, you can take it back. I was going to steal it from
No,
you.
it's just helpful. I pointed it out because it's helpful.
We can make copies.
I'll give you a copy after.
Maybe the budget cuts won't allow copies. I don't know. Anyways,
So if I may, we're certainly going to have a larger discussion around the budget later on this evening. So if there are any other questions specific to the town manager's letter, I would take those now, and then otherwise I'll move on with the chair's report. Hearing no voices, I just have a couple of other things that I want to mention in the chair's report. February 2nd, the CPAC, the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, will have a Q&A with the Executive Director of Special Education, Marcy Bacuzzi. That'll be February 2nd at 7 p.m. And I think that's been, I've seen it on Facebook, but I assume that it's shared with anybody who's part of the CPAC. But it's open to anybody in the community, whether or not they have students who are currently served by special education. And this committee, the school committee community chat, our second one of the year, will be on February 10th at 2:30 in the afternoon, and that is an early release day. So that gives an opportunity. This committee had asked that there be opportunities for students to speak with school committee. So if there are any students, as well as any other community members, parents or non-parents, who'd like to speak in an informal setting, we'll be happy to have that conversation with you. I believe the nightly news is going out tomorrow, Dr. Gilligan?
It is.
And the link to that information, as well as some of the information we've shared tonight, will be going out with the nightly news tomorrow. So that's all I have in the chair's report. So we're going to be going to the public hearing next, but usually what we do before we start the public hearing is have a few slides from the administration to set the stage for the public hearing. Those of you who may be waiting for the public hearing, we're going to admit you to that meeting when we've had our vote, our motion and our second and our vote to open the public hearing. And at that point, you'll be let in. So if we can have just those few slides, Doctors Mealy and Gilligan.
Yeah, certainly. Dr. Mealy, if you could go to slide 2. So the FY22 budget, just a few key points here, is that 2.5%, that provides us with level services, bringing over what we had this year into next year. You know, many of you know we signed an MOA in June, and with some rearranging this year, we'll also be having a high school schedule initiative. We'll be adding 5 high school teachers, world language, history, science, social studies, and mathematics. And that would be at North Andover High. I think the second key point is that, as you've seen in the town manager's letter, is we're in the process of identifying COVID-related expenses for FY22. They'll be funded as one-time expenses. We know that we're going to have students who may have gaps. They may have faced trauma. They may need SEL support. They may need literacy support, mathematics across all levels. And we're committed to getting kids the support they need, not only this year, but well into next year. I mean, the COVID and the impact of COVID will reverberate for, I think, years to come, and it's critical to put those people in place. The third part is looking, based on the directives and based on looking at the entire situation, it adjusts our plan to account for the impact of the pandemic, but also coincide with the facilities master plan and the building projects. One of the main pieces that we've struggled with over the years is space. And as you saw, whether it was in the 5-year plan or this expanded plan, there are teachers, particularly at the middle school in the 5-year plan and built out in this, where we don't have space to put them. And so it's critical that the subcommittee headed up, members with Jim and Ms. Vitsky Lynch and the group that participates, makes recommendations around, what those spaces will be, so that, our needs will drive the creation of those spaces, and then we'll have the ability to do something bigger and put the folks in the right spots to impact class size and create the best spaces for kids to learn and teachers to teach. And then I think, in North Andover, I think there's a lot to be proud of. I mean, last year we advocated for more money. It's the first time in a long time that, there was advocating for more money, and it wasn't a consensus budget to start. But working with the town and being able to get to that spot last year, I think we've highlighted that we need to do more. And the annual percentage increase, whether it's 1% here or it's a 1.5 more there, it's marginally impacted over time where we're getting with these increases. And we're looking at the bigger picture. If we're going to dramatically change the trajectory of funding and education here in North Andover, I think we need a big picture in terms of facilities, spaces, staffing. It's going to require bold moves, and I think, everyone's got the same goal. And at the end, we want to create the best educational experience for all of our students, have the best facilities we have, and I think it's critical that we have a plan that folks buy into, that they support, and it has to be across town. It can't just be the superintendent, the school committee. It's got to be the superintendent, the school committee, the stakeholders, the community members, the selectmen, the town manager, and I think that's really, really important. There's a phrase, go slow to go fast. I think maybe my predecessor used to say that quite a bit. And, I think that we are in store for some great things if we can have a big plan, put it all together, have the buy-in, and make it work if people commit to a longer-term plan. So we're excited about that and realize that some people may want to go faster sooner. But we presented last week. We have the public hearing tonight, and we're excited for, to come back on the 4th. Next slide, Jim.
This is the next slide.
Oh, sorry. These progressive lenses. Tough. All right. So the FY budget overview, the strategic plan and budget directives, the FY22 recommended budget, COVID-related budget, the 7-year plan, and the operating budget. Next one, James. Folks are familiar with our strategic plan, equity for all students, consistent and rigorous curriculum, and targeted professional practice, driving what we do. Helen, did you want to say anything about the school committee budget directives?
I'm happy to do so. I think the first and the last one probably are the ones that are different from prior years. We asked, I think the easiest way to say it in broad terms is that we asked our administration to use 3 sets of lenses for this year's budget. One is the lens of COVID, one is the lens of our strategic plan, and one is the lens of our long-term goals. The stuff in the middle that's been brought up many years in a row now with regarding class sizes. It changed slides on me. With regarding class sizes, with regarding teaching positions, with regards to, next slide, professional development and how important that is right now, because nobody has ever taught this way in a hybrid model in public schools, and nobody has ever needed to help students to recover from incomplete learning. So that's what a lot of that stuff is in the middle. And then again, the 5-year plan is at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Dr. Mealy, could you speak to the recommended budget program summary, please?
So yeah, not to repeat what I said last time, just to highlight, I explained why, for the most part, the numbers look like a 2.5% increase, but maintenance is down and transportation is up, and it's because maintenance, we had large purchases, a couple of vehicles this past year that we won't need next year, and so that's why it's down. And transportation, they froze the rates for us, and then the true rates go into effect for next year. So that's why that one is up. But overall, it's 2.5%. And I just will say again that this was because of the negotiations we had with our unions, and that next year they negotiated for the most part an average of 1.5% to the salary schedule, which is the lowest we've had in a long time. And then we'll talk more about this in the next couple of slides, but in the letter, the town manager committed, the language she used was that $2,642,185 would be formally appropriated at town meeting. So that's as good as a guarantee we can get that money will be available to us. And as we said before, that the bulk of that is hoped to be used on recovery services. And we're hopeful it will be more than $1 million that will be available, because we certainly hope, as Dr. Gilligan said earlier, that we're back in a regular year and we won't need all of those other, like OLA or PPE or things like that.
Right, and there's quite a bit of work that goes into providing recovery services. So the guiding questions that guide us are, what will it take to reopen schools safely for all students every day? What COVID response investments will we need to continue? What work did we start that may have been paused due to COVID? What do our students need to recover from learning loss? What are the new issues do we need to be prepared to handle that were caused during this pandemic? And what resources are needed to produce equitable and excellent outcomes for all students and our highest needs students? We know that students who receive special education services, EL, from a lower socioeconomic status, have been disproportionately affected across the Commonwealth by this pandemic. Next slide, Jim. So when you talk about recovery services, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Marks in a second, but we talk about, okay, what are those standards? What do we want kids to know and be able to do? What are those non-negotiables that it's the foundation of what you need to know each year? How do the student assessment is academically and social emotional learning? How do we know that they know it? How are we going to respond? And what do we need for teachers? And to get into a little more in depth on those, I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Marks.
So a lot of the concern is especially around our elementary age students, and the students have not been in school since mid-March to mid-September. They came in the fall, and we conducted both literacy and math assessments in grades K through 5 in the fall. And we used that data and that information to help inform our instruction. One example of that would be our first graders who were kindergartners last year. And again, as I mentioned, when we're talking about first and second graders, you're really working on those foundational skills. So one of the assessments we use is the Dibbles assessment, and we saw that our first graders coming in the fall were still struggling, not quite where we wanted them with correct letter sound. So we focused a lot of intervention there. We brought in the Hegarty program to work on phonemic awareness, which you've heard me talk about in some other presentations. On January 15th, just a couple of weeks ago, we had the Hegarty people provide a virtual training for our staff. So that's an example of how we use that data to inform our instruction and look at where those gaps are. The fall data would not be what we use to look at recovery services because that's going to be old data. Currently, we're in the process of mid-year assessments in both literacy and math, and we're going to be looking at growth and continued areas of need. The areas of need will then be addressed and targeted in data meetings, again, with teachers, coaches, and principals. So we'll continue to work on those, and we will retest in the spring. With that mid-year data, we will also begin to start to frame out how we'll look at determining recovery services. And the recovery services, as Dr. Gilligan mentioned, would be targeted. We will provide direction and support on specific instructional practices, and we will progress monitor. We need to assess whether the interventions that we are doing are giving us the results that we want, and if not, we need to look at that differently. And the recovery services can look a variety of ways. It is premature to say, oh, we're going to hire 15 interventionists and we'll put 3 at each elementary school. We really want to target what those needs are, and then we may look at things like, are there places where we need to hire more teachers to make a smaller class size for a year to really make up for that lost time? Are there places where we do need a math or a literacy interventionist? Maybe it's a combination of both. Where do we need additional coaching to support our teachers in instructional practices, and what sort of professional development do we need? And it's also important to note that we will also likely have some grants that help support that. I know I mentioned that we have a vacation grant, whether we actually use that in April or whether that is used in the summer, and whether we also have more possibilities for summer recovery services is something that we're looking into as well. So just to give you an idea of how that process is going to work and how we're looking at those, at the data and what makes sense in terms of services. Any questions? Or do you want me to wait? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think we'll hold questions for when the committee is going to be having its discussion later on. This is just to set the stage for the public hearing.
Thank you.
Great. I think everyone here on the next slide can see, thank you, Ms. Marks, the long-term plan and the school needs based on position, based on capacity, and the projects coming online. Next slide, Jim.
So there was the feedback I got from the initial presentation was there was some confusion in trying to show how we went from the 5-year plan to the 7-year plan, and it was all in one place. So I pulled them apart in this presentation. So this is a reminder of what the 5-year plan was. And it answers that question of what positions would have been added this year. So you can see in column 2, FY22 year 2, we had an assistant principal, we had the high school teachers, some special education teachers, an EL teacher, a social worker, and a reading teacher. And one of the questions that Ms. Fiske-Lynch had asked is which of those positions would require more space, and in all likelihood the 3 bolded ones would require extra space. The other ones we don't believe would. And as a reminder, this was the 5-year plan overall in the annual percentage increases of 4.5% over the 5 years. And then I just, again, pulled it apart. So this is now the 7-year plan as it looks without any comparison. And you can see that we've changed the amounts based on the OPEB liability, and we've moved things into different years. And the 5 teachers that Dr. Gilligan mentioned are in under the high school teachers. And that's the only item for this year that's beyond level services. And again, this is just a summary chart that you had seen before about what the 7-year plan looks like, where the percentage increases change. Instead of 4.5 per year, we've got 2.5 this year, and then 4.5, and then 4.7, and then just over 4, and then 4.6. And then we would anticipate by year 7 that we're back in that model of level services plus whatever identified needs there might be in that given year. And then we just try to provide a timeline of what this looks like overall.
Yeah, capturing the plan. So as you know, we hired several special education teachers and program teachers last year at different places in the district. We hired a 6th grade teacher to fill out a 3-person team to make it similar to all the other teams at the middle school. And we hired an EL teacher. As we go into year 2, we talked about earlier in the key points about the high school schedule initiative. and the need for mathematics teacher, English language arts, social studies, science, and world language. Dr. Mealy, do you want to talk a little bit about the school capacity subcommittee work?
So, yeah, it's ongoing. It's going well so far, and the timeline for this is that this year will be the subcommittee work with the goal of bringing to the school committee the different options and the different costs and the pros and cons of all of the different options, so that the school committee in year 3 can conduct deliberations and get public input to make a recommendation for the May 2022 town meeting for the facilities master plan, the 4 projects that are school projects as part of that.
And what I like about that, Dr. Mealy, is I like the fact that there's a subcommittee looking at this. They won't leave any stone unturned, and they'll have the ability to say, we've looked at every option possible. We've looked at X, Y, and Z, you know, and then they'll bring it to the committee, and then it'll be vetted, and you'll have a lot of different eyes on it, so that, you know, we have projects now that will be here a long time here in North Andover serving our kids.
Can I just ask a point of clarification? So it sounded like you're saying 3 town meetings from now, but you're saying 2 town meetings from now.
So not the coming town meeting,
But the next one.
the one after that.
Okay, I just want to, it
22.
sounded longer than that. I was just wanted to be sure. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then, you know, this plan just takes you through year 3, which would be FY '23, and the positions would be adding in.
Yeah.
Next slide, Jim, with year 4, which would bring on Facilities Master Plan Project 1, the positions for that year. Year 5, which would be FY '25, the positions brought on, and the Facilities Master Plan Project 2. And then it brings you to FY '26, Project 3, and the staffing needed, and then FY '27, Facilities Master Plan Project 4. You know, and I think that, you know, these things are critical. I think these, you know, although we're talking about the operating budget this year, we're talking about the money needed to bridge the gap in recovery services of what our kids deserve and what they need, whether it's through intervention, coaching, smaller class size, and how we'll bridge that gap. These bigger project really plays into it. I think, you know, I said the other night, I'm the 8th superintendent here in 15 years, and, you know, we've been fighting over 1% here and these percentages every year, and we're still, you know, marginally impacting the bottom line, still in that bottom percent. And I think tying these plans together with a longer-term plan and a commitment from everyone and building that consensus, we can really change the trajectory here in North Andover and add this over time, the appropriate staffing and facilities we need for our kids.
Yeah, one other disclaimer is normally logistics, you only want to tackle one big project at a time or per year. But if it's possible, maybe we can do 2 in a year or and shorten the timeline a little bit. So that's something that we're looking at as well. And so, you know, we're going from $52,991,000, adding $1.3 million, which is 2.5%. So our FY22 budget would be $54.3 million. These were the questions that were raised at the first meeting. Some we've already talked about. One of the questions was, I think, David, you had asked how many districts contribute to OPEB liability through the operating budget. I sent this out on the listserv, which goes out statewide. Nobody, that doesn't mean that there's not somebody out there that does it, but no one indicated that they do it from the many that I got back. So no districts have reported that, and I do have a sheet that shows what the projected OPEB liability expenses would be in a coming slide. Do we have a guarantee for the $1 million for recovery services? Yes, the town manager addresses this in her communication to the school committee. As I said, she is formally recommending appropriation at town meeting. What positions are being deferred? Which of these are critical? And which of these require space? Those are the ones that I showed you in the 5-year plan. In FY22 year 2 on slides 12 and 13. And the bold amounts are those that Ms. Vitsky-Lynch had asked about space needs. But we believe that, as far as putting them off a year, we believe that the services provided by those positions are going to be covered by COVID-related funding for FY22. We just had another grant that is going to be made available to schools and able to spend up until, I think it's September of 2023.
Yes.
So we do anticipate the ability to still provide those services through other funding other than the operating budget. And so you could put them off, as far as the operating budget goes, until FY '23. How will we assess and meet our recovery services needs specific to reading, numeracy, and our elementary students? That was just discussed. Do we have a commitment from the town manager to our long-term plan regarding the identified school projects and the operating budget increases that will allow us to address our identified needs and class size reduction goals? I say yes from the town manager letter. The language she used was that she pledges her commitment to our long-term goals. By what date must we have approval of the school committee budget, was a question that we had. And while we normally do it during that week around the 4th or 5th, it would be okay, it would still work out if we needed to push it out a week or two from that. And here's that liability expenses sheet I was talking about. It just shows the positions as they come along online. 6,000 per is put into the budget, and then it stays there throughout. And you can see the year 3 positions, 10 years of $60,000. That's 10 positions, and then 10 years starting in year 4 of 90,000. That's not an additional every year. It's once it's in there, it just stays in there, and then it lasts for 10 years. So overall, it's $3 million.
Dr. Mealy, for the folks at home that do not know what OPEB liability is, could you just explain what that is?
Okay. So
in a nutshell.
Basically, employees that have worked for North Andover and retire from employment from North Andover are eligible to receive health care benefits. They have a contribution to that health care to get the coverage, and the town, just like it does with active employees, has a contribution amount as well. And so the OPEB liability is that amount for each employee in the future that the town would have to pay. I guess that's the best way I can
Other
explain it.
post-employee benefits.
Right,
That's what it
but
stands
it's
for, right?
specific to the
Right.
healthcare.
Right.
Yep.
And last but not least, how did this come about, the OPEB liability? This is not something that we've had in previous years.
Never.
In the budget.
No.
So this is the first year that we've included it in.
Right,
So-
it's similar to the retirement. They put that one in forward and said, it's an accounting thing that you need to account for that future cost. And so some towns have now started to try to put aside money to have in reserve so that they could, if for some reason, and honestly, I don't know how that happens, but the town goes bankrupt or goes out of business, they
Yeah.
still could cover those expenses.
So where does the money sit?
It's got about $4-point-something
Yeah.
million
They
in
showed
it.
that the other night.
Right now, it's a reserve
It
account.
just sits there,
It's there.
doing
and
nothing.
Collecting interest.
no interest.
No interest?
Well, I mean,
So
like, what,
Reinvest
what,
it.
I'm going to ask us to save our questions for later. We're going to get to
I'm
the
sorry.
public.
I think we're done. I think,
Yeah.
Do that.
well, for the public, that's right.
Sorry,
We're
Chair.
not doing questions now. We're going to do the questions and discussion after the public hearing.
okay.
Okay? Thank you. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Nope.
So, having had that overview of the budget, I would entertain a motion to move into the public hearing.
So I will move that we move into a public hearing to discuss the fiscal year 2022 budget.
Second,
Moved by Mr. McDevitt and seconded by Ms. Mably. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And it is now 8:15 PM for the minutes, and we'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Teresi,
Yes.
Ms. Mably,
yes.
Ms. Lynch,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, so there's 5-0, and it is 8:15. What's going to happen now is I'm going to leave this meeting, and I'm going to go into the public hearing meeting, which is a different Google Meet, and Ms. Mably is our production manager for that, so she's going to let me into that room, and she's going to let in anybody else who's waiting. And when we get there, I'll give a little bit more information. If anyone is going into the public hearing, they must mute this meeting, whether they're watching it on TV or on their computer or whatever, or we'll get audio feedback.
It's like a play within a play.
Mm-hmm. But you guys don't have to go to it.
No, I know.
didn't have to admit Helen.
Is that your screen or hers?
It's not mine.
Oh, I wonder if that's Cam.
Yeah, Cam's gonna take care of it.
Okay.
So I just want to give a little bit of information. North Andover Cam is in this meeting so that they can present this. Katherine Koch has joined us. Okay, so during this public hearing, I will call on members of the public by name so that they can make their statement, ask their questions. During the public hearing, it's different from public comment in that members from the room, members of the committee, members of the administration can respond to the questions. There can be some discussion back and forth. We will want to keep all our comments and discussion with regards to the budget. If there are other topics you want to discuss, they can't be done during this meeting. So does anybody have any questions about that? I'll ask the members. Does that seem clear enough?
Clear.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I do have a public comment from a member of the public that I will read into the record, but I don't want to keep the people who are live with us waiting for that. So please remind me if I should forget that we need to read that before we exit the public hearing. Anybody watching, if you suddenly feel like you'd like to join the public hearing, you may do so by clicking on the link until such time as we have a motion to close the public hearing. Once that motion is made, we will not allow other people into the public hearing room. So thank you, Ms. Mabley, for doing that. And I just want you to know that right now I cannot see the room, the actual room, North Andover Cam. If you could provide that on the screen, that might be helpful for those of us that are joining remotely. And the first person in the grid that I'm looking at, oh, let me say this as well. If anybody does not have Google Meet and is joining by phone, I will not be able to see your name. I'll only see your phone number. And there will be stars on some of those. So I will call you out by your phone number to join the meeting should you join by phone. This is all new technology and really kind of exciting for us to give this a try. So you're welcome to turn on your cameras. I would ask you to please stay muted until you are called. So the first one in the grid for me is David Brown. Dave Brown, do you have something you would like to say in the public hearing?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm appreciative of all the work everyone's doing. The main thing that I'm interested in is hearing a little bit more detail about the plans to close the gap that was just discussed to some degree earlier, and in particular how the $1 million was arrived at, how that figure was arrived at as a number that we want to try to get for the following year, and any comments that members have or administration has about plans going forward, because I think that gap is likely to be here for a while. And thank you.
Thank you, Dave Brown, and you're welcome to stay on throughout the public hearing after you've made your comments, but I would ask you to mute while we get some response to that.
Sure.
I'm happy to respond. I know Lorene Marks is trying to get in on here, and she was having a trouble with the link. But when we put together a COVID recovery line items up, the $2.6 million, the million was in the COVID recovery, academic recovery, social emotional learning recovery. And as we were talking about earlier with the assistant superintendent, we continue to this year find out where kids are. How are they performing? If they are in point A and we need them to get to point B, what do we need to do to get them there? What do we have to prescribe? What interventions necessary? What teaching has to happen? And then we have to progress monitor. And after we're progress monitoring, we have to see how the progress we're making. Are those effective? And if not, what additional supports are needed? And we definitely anticipate that there will be support needed in terms of, as Ms. Marks talked earlier, interventionists, whether it's math or reading and early literacy. We're going to need social emotional learning support. No doubt about it. If we can't attend to the the social emotional learning needs of students. It's very difficult for them to attend to academics. The research is really clear on that. And as we continue to progress right now and get the mid-year data on the progress kids are making and where they're at, that will better inform us what we specifically need. So in addition to those positions, we may want to use all the available space possible in a plan of a full return to even lower class size to make a difference and catch up with some of those. So, that's where we stand right now. And it may take up more money than the $1 million in the 2.6.
Thank you, Dr. Gilligan. Dave?
Yeah, I guess I was curious how the $1 million number was arrived at. There must have been you must have put together sort of a straw man budget, if you will, for what you'd spend that on. I know I don't need all the details, obviously, but just some sort of idea about, 500K went for this, 200K went for that kind of thing.
Well, when we're looking at the academic recovery, I mean, we have to think about what are some of the needs we may have in terms of special education, what are some of the literacy needs, and if we're looking at, we've budgeted positions in the regular budget at $66,000, what are some of those things that we think we will need at the different levels in order to close those gaps? Identifying specifically what they are at this point, we definitely know the areas, but a lot of it will depend on what type of progress the kids make and then what those needs are. Lorene, did you want to add anything else to that?
No, I think that you're speaking directly to what we had looked at.
So that's about 15 positions. 66 million, I mean, 1 million divided by 66,000 is about 15 positions.
Right, so what we basically did is, as David, I think, is alluding to, is if we need this many to provide these services or for reading or whatever else we might need, EL or whatever services we have, then that's the cost of this many positions, and then, you add it all up and you get about 15 or 16, and you estimate it to be $1 million without knowing exactly what your needs are going to be yet.
And I think the other thing I just want to mention too is that I spoke primarily to elementary school because those are really the foundational skills, and I know there's a lot of concern there, but I think we also have to make sure that we check in at our secondary levels too to see, if there's a need there and what it might look like.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question. And anybody who wants to speak or wants to speak again is welcome to raise their hand either electronically or if you've got your video on, you can raise your hand in that way. So I'm going to go, the next person that I have in my grid is Katherine Koch. So Kathy, if you want to join us.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Kathy Koch, 239 Granville Lane. I see I'm a little bit blurry. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what else I can do about that at the moment. I wanted to ask about and speak a little bit to reading and math intervention, particularly reading. My concern really is that the district historically has done very poorly in providing the amount of reading services that are required. There's not a lot of work that I have seen going into tiered intervention, trying to get to kids before they are really floundering. And I'm concerned in this budget, especially in the move to the 7-year from the 5-year, that reading positions are being pushed out. And the reason I hear reading positions being pushed out is less budgetary and more having more to do with space concerns. And I work in schools for a living. I'm a school administrator. I've worked elementary and middle. You can always find a place for a reading teacher. They can have a desk in another teacher's classroom. They can have a desk in a conference room. And while it's not ideal, putting those services in place is really a preventative measure. This year, the district, to my understanding, has chosen to focus on the early elementary grades for reading. So you're focusing on the foundational skills, but that does not address students who already were struggling to read in past years and might be in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, lost ground last year in the closure and are not receiving any services this year. And I know that that's a problem across the elementary levels. And so I was hoping after the last budget presentation, to at least see, and maybe some of this is being thought to come out of the COVID recovery money for next year, but from a long-term perspective, I think that there needs to be a real dedication to getting at least one full-time reading interventionist in every building, with an additional half-time person in the larger elementary schools, because you have these kids who last year in 2nd or 3rd grade who are starting to make this transition from, kind of learning to read to the reading to learn, and they have gaps, and now they're not getting service this year because they're in 3rd or 4th grade. And any of those kids who might have already been behind are not getting service, and that's just going to continue to snowball on them. And I think that there needs to be a look at that whole elementary piece, and I'm hopeful that's in the 2.6, but I also think it needs to be more permanently in the budget across the 7-year plan to put the reading specialists in immediately, rather than waiting. I just don't think the kids have time to wait. So I don't know if somebody can speak to that.
I can start, Kathy, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Marks on some of the more specifics about literacy, but that's a great question. And as you know, working in schools, how valuable reading teachers are and the interventions that they provide for students. So absolutely, within the recovery services, we will be looking at interventionists, to meet that need. You mentioned some really good points about space. I think it's critical that we provide those interventionists. We will be using that $2.6 million within there to do so. I can say that it wasn't very long ago that North Andover, I'm not sure how many years ago, had no reading teachers across the district, and we have been adding them back. We've also been trying to provide the professional development and the teacher collaboration, to make a bigger bang for our buck in terms of best practices within the classroom, with Tier 1 and Tier 2 support. But we have added folks back, and I will have Ms. Marks talk a little bit more about those strategies, but it would certainly be in those recovery services for sure. Lorene?
One of the biggest pluses we've had is the addition of our literacy coaches who've been working very closely with our teachers. Right now, they are preparing and supporting the teachers with a lot of their literacy lessons. Included in that, you had mentioned the tiered supports. We're really trying to get some stronger focus on those Tier 1 supports right in the classroom, what's happening with our teachers and our students in small groups within the classroom. I understand and agree. I was a principal when we lost the reading teachers that we had. It went way down, and we are slowly building that back up. We're really looking at collaborating with our reading interventionists, our classroom teachers, our special ed teachers. I'm sure if you're working in schools, you're aware of the universal screeners, the dyslexia discussions. So there was in fact another PD this afternoon with our reading teachers and some of our special ed staff around literature and material on screening and providing appropriate instruction for those students. So we do catch them early, because it is imperative. You don't want to see a student struggling in reading and struggling in school and potentially dropping out of school because they don't have those skills that they needed put in place when they were young.
I guess, can I ask a follow-up? Mr.
Yes,
Carter?
please.
Okay. So I guess, I hear that, and I appreciate the fact that the reading teachers are coming back in. We moved into town 14 years ago now, kind of right as things were taking this kind of downslide. Positions were being, I'm sorry, my children unmirrored my screen. The things took this kind of downside, and now we're slowly coming up, and there's this kind of donut hole that, and my 3 kids happen to fall into it. So they're right in that age range where, okay, we're going to wait for a new middle school. Okay, all of my kids are going to be out of middle school. We're going to wait for reading teachers. My son who's in elementary, he's going to be, next year's his last year in elementary. I mean, I think it's great that my child who's going to go into high school next year is going to have, additional teachers at the high school. But I think that there is just, I appreciate the reading teachers coming back. There's just such a lack of urgency, and I'm so concerned with the long-term impacts of COVID. And I mean, I get it, and I live it every day, just like you guys do. But there has got to be more of a sense of urgency in the budgeting process to say, we have to have this now. We can't put a reading teacher in every year for 7 years. Like the reading has to come now. And I think similarly with the research showing where the gaps are coming in mathematics from COVID, which I think took a lot of people by surprise. But, you know, are there going to be some math coaches and some math specialists coming in as well? These pieces, the kids are just going to fall too far behind if we don't address the gaps that were already there in addition to the gaps that were created this year. The multiplier, the exponential multiplier of this is going to be, I think, somewhat disastrous if we don't get that support. And so I'll leave that there and let somebody else have a turn for now. I might have something later, but thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Ms. Koch. Thank you very much. Is there anything additional that the administration wants to add in?
I just want to say thank you, Kathy, for your comments. I hope you know that it's important to us. You know, we're talking about a longer-term plan, but as I said at FinCom the other night, our second graders only get one crack at second grade right now. Our seventh graders only get one crack right now. Just because we're adding things in the budget in future years and a longer-term plan doesn't mean that we're not looking at this data now. We're not going to do and come up with the best educational plan using all the money that's available, whether it's through the COVID relief, the $2.6 million from the town managers, the grant, the level services, to continue that work. And we certainly plan on doing so. And if Ms. Marks had anything else, she could add it, but you know, that's how I feel about it. And a
Thank you,
very
Dr.
good point.
Milligan.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, I'm going to move to the next person in the grid here, who is Stan Limpert.
Thank you very much, Ms. Picard. I appreciate it. I just had a couple of comments and a couple of questions. First is, let me echo some comments that were made the other night in the Finance Committee meeting, which were compliments to the school administration for really the budget plan, the 5-year or 7-year budget plan you put together. The comments all were sort of the same, which said, we've been looking for a plan like that for a long time, and you finally did one, and we really appreciate it. And I think you all need to be complimented for having done that. It's given us all a lot clearer picture of where you think we need to be going and what you think the details are of the things that need to be added. In response to some comments with respect to the town manager and some of the things that she's committed to, so others can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard when listening to the Finance Committee on Tuesday was that she is planning to spin down free cash for the FY22 budget to almost nothing, 250,000 or something.
Too many.
So
million.
it sounded to me like her expectation was that because of the circumstances we're in, she's going to use as much of that money as she can for one-time expenses, including the $2,600,000 that the schools need for their COVID efforts. So I think she's doing a lot to make use of free cash to help us when we really need it. So I think that's important. A couple of questions on the budget. I wanted to ask Dr. Mealy, do you see in any of the sort of the budget line, the big budget line items, you know, like special education or transportation, do you see there being any potential risks in any of those categories that something might change within that, the coming budget year that would impact the overall budget?
I don't.
Dr. Mealy?
Yeah, so first, I'll just clarify on the free cash. Her plan had it spending down to 2-point-something million, with the big outlays being 2.6 to the schools and over 4 million for capital, with the idea that the 5 or 5.5 or 6 million that might be coming in from Amazon would get it back up to somewhere between 7 and 8 million.
Right.
So that was that. As far as the surprises, transportation is pretty steady. The only thing that could happen there is if, for instance, the distance stays the same as it is right now, and we would need double the buses in order to bring everybody back. But that is a whole other issue, because I don't see there being that many buses available for all districts. So other than that, the contracts are pretty steady. We have a set price for next year. And as far as special education goes, the biggest concern going into any year is the unanticipated expenses as a result of out-of-district placements, but we have the stabilization fund to offset that. So I don't think so, to answer your question.
Mr. Mealy, will you have any money from this year that could be used to prepay special education expenses for next year?
We hope so. We always hope so.
Okay.
You know, so as we go, we've got some funds committed that the town manager is setting aside for us to continue to pay for COVID expenses till the end of the year. We had anticipated that some operating funds would cover expenses as well, but we're certainly hopeful that we'll get to the end of the year and have some funds available to prepay so that we start next year with a little bit of a buffer.
Okay. So my other budget question, Dr. Mealy, is that I was trying to reconcile the charts in your presentation. The only expense that you had left in FY22 from your initiatives chart was the high school teachers. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that was for what, 5 teachers?
So originally in the 5-year plan, it was for 7 teachers.
Okay.
So that was $420,000. And we've modified that to 5 for $310,000. And that's going to get funded from some positions we didn't fill this year and the $130,000 that had been set aside for special education contingency. So what that means is that we would have to tap into the stabilization fund sooner than we normally would because we haven't built in our own contingency.
So is that, so because you're paying for those 5 teachers with other sources of funds, is that why in your chart on page 11, it shows 0 for the initiatives for FY22?
Correct.
Okay. Even though those are, that was part of the initiative.
It is an initiative, yes. But I was trying to...
Through creative financing, you were able to meet the initiative's requirement without
exceeding level services, correct.
That's right. Now, just one more question. You have stated in several meetings that in a typical year, our level services number is around 3%. Is that correct?
It's amazingly consistently 3%, yes.
Okay, so with the level that you negotiated for the teachers this year, would that mean that level services this year would be more like 2%?
No, it brought it down 0.5%. What we negotiated, it is a level services is 2.5% instead of 3%. So we were able to save 0.5%. And would anticipate in future years it being back to 3%.
Okay, so the level services this for FY22 is 2.5%, and let's call it the discretionary is 0.5%.
No, there's no discretionary. It's creative.
Well, I mean, money that's
it's
not
creative financing that
Yeah,
made
no,
it
I
not-
understand.
Well,
By that I mean
as a
money
finance
that's
guy, I
not
bristle
for
against
the
creative financing.
Yes.
It's the fact that we were responsible this year and we didn't fill all our positions. So those 3 are in the budget, and to continue them is level services. So those are 3 positions that were already in the budget. We're just, instead of the original intent, we're going to use them at the high school. And then we budget a contingency every year, but we're not going to have that contingency this year. That's going to go to the positions, and instead of being in the budget, we'll have to access the stabilization fund earlier by $130,000 than we normally would.
So you're already anticipating using the special education stabilization fund next year.
Well, it's a possible.
No, I'm not anticipating that, although if I had a bet on it, chances are good, but every year, so for instance, last year we did not have to, and this year I don't think we're going to have to. Next year we might.
Okay.
So I'm gonna stop that here.
Yeah, okay.
And move on to another participant. Thank you, Mr. Limpert, for your time tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay, and should you wish to follow up if there's time later on, you can certainly raise your hand. And so the next person in my grid is the Family Young. Family Young. Oh,
Yeah,
there you
sorry
are.
about that.
That's all right. Can you give us
So-
your name? And I'm sorry, I should have asked everybody's home address. I know that Ms. Koch did provide that for us. So we'll circle back with the others. But if you can give us your name, Family Young, that would be helpful.
Jeremy Young, 29 South Bradford Street. So we have 3 children still in district on IEPs, and so we've talked a lot about special education. And one of the concerns I have is obviously everybody's trying to wrap their heads around where we stand with, for all the students, making up any lost, education because of COVID, but also what the summer services might look like this year, in supporting those students, and when we would be talking with our IEP teams to enact that, so to speak. So obviously they may not know, but we want to plan sooner than later for them, because we're hoping to have the opportunity for more socialized time through camps or activities, through the rec center, or wherever else. But obviously the academic portion is also very important. So we're just trying to understand where that will all fall into place, what plans are being made for those students, any differences from past year services in relation to making up COVID or preparing for the next school year.
Thank you, Jeremy. Is there anybody in the administration that wants to address that?
Jeremy, great question, and I'm going to put the Executive Director, Masi Bakouzi, on the line.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Mr. Young. I can talk a little bit about it because we've had a few conversations actually just in the past week. I met with Rick Gorman, early this week or late in the week last week, to get a sense. In years past, we have done some partnerships with him. We had expanded that the plan was, I should say, to expand that partnership last year, which unfortunately didn't come to fruition because of obvious situations that were occurring. So we're hoping to get back to that original partnership, to do exactly what you said, increase social opportunities for students. As far as additional services, we are planning for in-person programming, similar to what it was, but expanded for our program, high needs students. And then a combination of hopefully in-person tutoring as well as virtual tutoring. The thing that we would like to expand upon the tutoring is to, in years past, and like many other districts, you're often given tutoring times that are at times that, we have tutors available. So we have already solicited information from our teachers and community members for people who have tutored for us before to really, hopefully, and I think this is going to be the really challenging piece, increase our staffing for summer in order to have a lot of flexibility and timing to get for students to get those tutoring services. So, for instance, oftentimes, again, this is just the process for most communities, when you have, say your child is getting a 2 times 30 math service and you want them to go to the youth center, sometimes they have to come out of that, or sometimes parents choose not to have their child do the youth center on that day. And we're really, really trying to do our best to increase staff. So especially in this year where we all think it's so important to have that community engagement, so parents don't have to make those choices. So our goal is to really expand upon that collaboration with Rick Gorman and Rick Gallant, who are just fantastic to work with, by supporting as many students with our staff as possible there, and increasing the number of specialized personnel to do the tutoring over the summer. I am worried about personnel. I mean, I think, as you all have seen and probably experienced, I think our teachers are going to be tired. And I think in years past, we have a lot of teachers who are very willing to do summer services. I will say my initial ask of teachers, which I did get quite a few, actually a lot more than I anticipated, that are looking for more information about tutoring and programming. So I'm cautiously optimistic about that, but still a little worried. I think the end of the year, getting to the end of the year, summer is different. Summer last year, we had the benefit of it being quite a long summer. This summer is not the same, but we really are looking at like a week off, a 6-week program, and then a week before school starts again. So we were hoping to expand upon things weeks wise, but with the way the 4th of July is, that may or may not be able to happen. But we're hoping to address all of those issues. And just to wrap in, there was a public comment about the worry of students who are in OLA, bringing them back, and how we're going to start those conversations about reintegrating students who have been out of the building for long periods of time. And summer's a great place to do that and a great time to do that. We've talked at the middle school and the high school level about doing some transition weeks, so 8th to 9th grade, sort of, for lack of a better word, boot camps for students who are transitioning to look at organizational skills and maybe some academics, social emotional. So those are all just in the conversation stages too.
I'd like to say in years past, and I very much appreciated working with the district on this, we have been able to a few times have tutoring at the youth center so that they were pulled out and able to do it there. But one of the recommendations, if possible, I know tutoring, we're subject to a lot of the families' availabilities, or the individuals tutoring rather, but possibly doing it after the, some of the activities. A lot of the youth center stuff during the summer, in my experience, is in the morning, and that's usually when the tutoring is also. So I don't know if there'll be opportunities for virtual to do it maybe later in the day, so it's more flexible for everybody else.
Yep, so that's exactly what we're talking about. The in-person will likely be in the morning for those parents, for those students who are available and maybe don't go. And but that's what we are looking to hopefully do, is increase the virtual tutoring for the afternoon for students who do go to the youth center, because what we do know is that we will not have space at the youth center for students to be pulled. So that's exactly what we're looking to hopefully have the staffing to be able to do.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Thank you, Ms. Bacuzzi. I just want to go back and get the residential addresses. Dave Brown?
Yep, hi, Helen. 35 Dave Brown, 35 Old Farm Road. I do want to ask another question, but I can wait till everybody else is gone.
Thank you. Yeah, let's go through everybody. And Mr. Limpert, residential address?
Stan Limpert, 43 Stonecleve Road.
Thank you. So the only other person in my grid right now is Bill Callahan. Bill, before I call on you, I just want to mention there was somebody on the hearing, Lenny Severino, who left the hearing before being heard. Lenny, if you're having technical difficulties, I would welcome you to send an email to picardh@northandoverpublicschools.com. And we can get you in that way if it's a technical difficulty for you. Mr. Callahan.
Good evening. Thank you for having me, Chair Picard, and thank you to the members of the committee for this occasion. I had one quick comment, and then...
Can we have your address first?
Oh, I'm sorry, 23 Lyman Road.
Thank you, go ahead.
Sure. So my comment is in regards to the OPEB liability, and one of the things I think would be a helpful way to look at it is that our OPEB goes up on average 7% per year in the budget in the town. And that's because we never saved any money for all those people who retired over the years for their health care insurance. And so every year that's a bigger and bigger slice of town expenses. So what the OPEB liability numbers do is it basically creates kind of you can almost think of it as a 401k for employees' health care when they retire. And what that'll mean is that less of that number won't always stay at 7 or go higher in the future. So in other words, the money is not actively being used, but it's going to go towards a good purpose and prevent, teacher or other layoffs in the future if it comes to that. So that's my comment. My question is, when I looked at the numbers presented in the 5-year plan and the 7-year plan, and I put them into the superintendent's forecasted 5-year revenues, I can see that it's not in too many years that the difference between her estimated revenues, or the town's estimated revenues, and the town's expenses with the school plan are pretty hefty. In other words, like $3 million in fiscal year 23, 4.5 million in fiscal 24. And the Amazon funds, if you remember the TIF, come in, they come in late after Amazon is up, and they come in at a fraction of what they would be otherwise because we, did an increment financing for them. So I just think as a point of discussion, and I know you guys don't all have the answers right now, but as a point of discussion, we're really talking about an order of magnitude that will have a significant impact on the town's finances. And I wonder how that conversation is going to kind of be strategically laid out to the town over the next few years.
Is there anybody who wants to start with a response?
Well, I can certainly start. I know last year we put together a 5-year plan. It was probably the first long-term staffing plan that we've seen in North Andover, with the understanding that operating budgets do run year to year, Mr. Callahan. And as we look forward, the school committee charged me last year as superintendent based on, my entry plan, which I met with over 1,100 people across the community. The directives from the school committee last year is to come up with a plan and advocate for what our students need. And, what is it that we need that could be sustainable, doable, in line with our values and aspirations of where we want to go as a community. And, I think over time we've produced some really tremendous results, and I think that, but there are some needs, and we've had some needs, and, we outlined those needs specifically last year, some of the needs in EL and special education, some of the challenges that we face with our Title I students, challenges across the board. So we try to put together the best plan we could over time that we think is doable, sustainable, and reasonable, because we know that we have some projects coming online. We know that the Amazon fees, particularly the permitting, is only a one-time fee, but hopefully, once they're online, they're producing, tax revenue each year. So these are what we think our kids need and deserve over this period of time. And, that's how we came together with this plan. Now, from a financial standpoint, Jim, would you like to add any commentary?
So at last year's Finance Committee meeting, in the same meeting, I was asked, why aren't we asking for more, and why are we asking for so much? And every year that we identify the needs, we're told that it's just too much, we can't afford it. And honestly, we are being extremely responsible with our long-term plan. We will still be well below the state average in per pupil spending, but we will be in a place that we feel very comfortable is meeting the needs of our students. And so how we get there, the town manager has committed to helping us get there, and we don't feel confident that we can do that every year having that same argument about the percentage increase. We believe we need a plan that everyone can buy into that gets us where we need to be. So.
Right, because a lot of the new initiatives over the year, if you just think about it in just an easy sense for the public to think about it, say we have a $50 million budget, right, and 1% is $500,000, and level services is, $300,000, 3%, in a lot of years you've seen, we've got 3.5%. So we have typically, $250,000 or so for new initiatives. And what we've seen over time in North Andover is we've readjusted, we've done cost-neutral shifts, and we've made significant progress in one area, and we've made some shifts, and then people say, well, how did we get here with this programming? And at some point there was a shift, with one of the superintendents or one of the budgets. So we think that, we do need more, but we also want to do so in a sustainable way. I know people talk a lot, and I've heard a lot of superintendents, including myself, talk about per pupil spending. Well, yeah, that's important, what we spend on our kids, and it plays a big role, but more importantly is how are we going to spend the money? What do we expect to get for that money? What kind of results are we going to produce, and what is that outcome going to be? And I think that, with the turnover in the superintendency and the turnover, we've had a lot of stable principals, but we've had a lot of new folks come in and some fresh blood. I think it's time that we really look at a longer-term plan that everyone can buy into, that is sustainable, doable, and that we can do over time and see through.
Thank you, Dr. Gilligan. Bill, you unmuted?
Yes, just real quickly. I mean, I guess what I was really asking the question to the folks on the board, because I think it's a larger community conversation. I think Dr. Mealy and Dr. Gilligan have laid out, an ambitious plan that meets a lot of needs. I think we can all agree that if you look at the North Andover schools over time, they've been historically less than well-funded, especially considering, how wealthy a town we are compared to the rest of the Commonwealth. I mean, we're the 55th richest town in the state of Massachusetts, and we don't spend anywhere near that. I'm not saying that spending equals quality or that spending in and of itself is anything great. I just think that this is a very large conversation in a community that
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right, Bill. And I think the way that we start that conversation is with the report out from our subcommittee about our facilities needs. And we move forward with the revenues and how they are, and with how the budgeting is going to go. And we talk about where new revenues may be coming in the longer term. But you're absolutely right. It's going to take a lot of big discussion and a lot of strategy and a lot of commitment, which I'm really excited at this point that we have those commitments from our town manager as well as from our administrative team. So I think we'll leave it there for now, but you're 100% right. We're going to need to have a lot of conversations, and we're certainly going to need to strategize and look at numbers and more than just small conversations. So thank you very much for bringing that up. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to read the public hearing comment that came in, and then I'm going to check on the will of the committee if we want to go back to the folks that are here, or if we're going to be closing the public hearing. So this is from Zora Warren of 129 Wayland Circle, and she states, thank you for focusing on equity for all students in the strategic plan for the 2021-22 school year. According to DESE, being able to read, write, and speak are essential for full participation in our society. Literacy affords access to ideas, opportunities, and so much more. But in the Massachusetts school system today, many children do not receive the instruction and support they need to develop a strong foundation for literacy in the grades pre-K through 3. Mass literacy is a statewide effort to empower educators with the evidence-based practices for literacy that all students need. Evidence-based instruction provided within schools and classrooms are culturally responsive and sustaining will put our youngest students on a path towards literacy for life. What specifically has been budgeted in the 2021-22 budget that will provide equity for all students to access evidence-based literacy core curriculum, not supplemental programs, in the mainstream classrooms? So I feel like we did talk about this a little bit earlier with Ms. Koch's questions, but is there anything the administration wants to address at this point with that comment?
I can speak to some of the curriculum that we are using in those grades. I've mentioned in the presentation I did a few times back that we are using and training our teachers in the Heggerty phonemic awareness piece, which has to do with early literacy and evidence-based practices. We use foundations in our primary grades, which also is research-based, evidence-based. We also use Lexia in our schools, which again falls into that category. We are doing a lot of PD around this issue. We are modifying some pieces of our curriculum that is in conflict with some of the language that might be used in some of the science of reading and this evidence-based teaching. So we are working on that. We have been attending a number of the state opportunities for PD around this. As Ms. Warren mentioned, the science of literacy, or the mass literacy curriculum that they've provided. So we are very active in all of those pieces and are really very doing everything we can to be proactive in terms of getting everything we can for our students. Another piece that I'd like to mention is I had presented last spring, I believe, just after the world kind of changed, the Student Opportunity Act grant funding. And yesterday on the commissioner's call, he mentioned that the governor is looking to fund that hopefully this year. That's what they're looking at. And part of our Student Opportunity Act grant was focused on early literacy and helping to purchase materials, provide PD, all of that around those areas as well.
Thank you. So I want to go around to the committee members and see if there's anybody that wants to make a comment or has any questions with regards to everything that we've heard so far, and get a sense of where we want to go with our public hearing at this point. So I will start with you, Mr. Teresi.
I have no questions for the members of the public. I thought maybe we'd close the public hearing and then ask questions of the administration, but that's my preference.
Thank you. Yep, Ms. Mably?
I was also going to just wait to have our conversation.
Yep, okay. Ms. Lynch?
No questions.
Okay, and Mr. McDevitt?
All good for right now.
Okay. I'm curious from members of the public that are with us, can you please raise your hand if you had anything else that you had wanted to say into this meeting tonight? I'm not seeing any hands raised. And so I'm just going to check my email because I did say to
give people a quick second if they're trying to turn on and off cameras there.
Yep. Well,
Okay.
I was looking for the hand raise function.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
So that would have only taken a click.
Dave Brown
And I do
raised his hand.
see one hand raised. Dave, do you have a quick thing to say or is it long?
Yeah, yes, it's really quick.
Go ahead.
Okay, just wanted to point out, when I think about the 15 or 16 people and their 13 grades, I'm a little concerned that might not be enough. A lot was spoken about reading gaps. I think math gaps are just as critical. So just want to put that out there for the administration to think about.
Okay, thank you very much.
And
okay.
thank you.
So members of the public are no longer going to be admitted in once I hear a motion to close the public hearing.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
So moved by Mr. Teresi and seconded by Mr. McDevitt, and we'll have a roll call vote starting with Ms. Mably,
Yes.
Mr. Teresi,
Yes.
Ms. Lynch,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you all for coming to the public hearing. If anybody has anything that they want to... Oh, I guess we closed the public hearing. Okay.
I didn't touch anything. Okay.
So I think she's switching now.
Yep.
Keeper of the public hearing is shutting it.
I didn't shut anything down.
Oh, Candace.
Yeah, Cam must have.
They're a
Okay.
driving force.
Anyway, it's gone now, so.
He's saying no.
No, I did close it after that, but it wasn't when Helen said the feedback. I hadn't touched anything, so. It's fine.
All right, so now we got to switch over.
Bum, bum, bum. Getting ready.
Meeting. I'm in the public meeting. I can see the room now. North Andover camera, are we set to continue our public meeting, our regular open meeting? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the technology. If anyone has things to say about the budget, we are not voting tonight. We do have a meeting scheduled for next week, so we would welcome public comment. We will not have another public hearing unless that's the will of the committee, but that's not the intention at this time. So we are on to our next agenda item, which is continued discussion of the superintendent's proposed fiscal year 22 budget. Does anybody want to start?
I'll go.
Am I? Thank you. I can't see you guys. You're not on the meet for me right now.
This is David, Helen.
There we go. Yep. Thank you, David.
I'll go.
I imagine somebody wanted to start.
No, that's all right. So first of all, I want to thank everyone who just testified. Public hearing, it's always great to hear from the public, especially during these kind of crazy times. Usually we'd have people in the audience, and it's not the same thing online. Am I okay? Can you hear me?
That's good.
Thank you. Good. I really appreciate Kathy's comments. I think she said something along the lines of there's no sense of urgency right now, and I couldn't agree with her more. And Greg said kids only have one shot at this, and only one shot at second grade or seventh grade. I can't agree with that more. It's imperative that we provide a budget that's going to provide for all the kids right now and not have this 7-year plan. And to Stan's point, who commended us for putting this plan forward, I would say that we put it forward last year. So I know we had the Board of Selectmen, the Select Board Chair had said, thank you for doing this. I'm like, well, we did it last year, but I guess he wasn't paying attention then. I want to say something about the OPEB real quickly because, Mr. Callahan, who I respect a lot, and was on the FinCom, so he knows what he's talking about when it comes to OPEB. This is something that I believe, and maybe I should ask him when he was on the call, but I believe it was started when he was on the OPEB. But my question, Jim, Dr. Mealy, and maybe you don't know the answer to this question, but it's kind of, obviously a lot of cities and towns aren't putting money aside for OPEB. And I guess it's like, what happens if we don't put money aside for it? I mean, that's the question. I mean, obviously we're taking money out of our operating budget. So is the town, don't get me wrong. But what happens if we don't do it?
Yeah, I wouldn't, I'd be guessing at that answer. I think it's a more appropriate question for the town finance director or the town manager.
I'll throw something out there, and if maybe I'll get an answer someplace else. But if it's not taken care of, I mean, if other cities and towns aren't doing it, they're not going to go bankrupt. My point is, this will be taken care of in some way, shape, or form if it becomes necessary. I'm going to use a little bit of an analogy when people are talking about, and it's in the news a lot about getting rid of all student loan debt. A lot of people put money aside, and they went to college, or their parents worked 2 jobs, and they provided for their kids to go to college, and now it's like all these people are saying get rid of all student debt. Well, what about the people that did the right thing? Are they going to get money back? Do you think that if this ever comes to a head, do you think other cities and towns that aren't putting money for OPEB, they would make us take this money when they're going to bail out other cities and towns? So I have a real issue with the whole notion of putting aside money for OPEB because it takes away from the operating budget every single year, and especially when only a handful of communities are doing it. And maybe maybe it's not the correct analogy, but it's not about rewarding bad behavior. It's about like, this is kind of theoretical, and we don't know if it's going to come to fruition, and it impacts our kids right now, today, by putting this money aside. So that's a larger conversation, but maybe I should talk to Bill more about that. The other thing I want to say about the consensus budget. I think it's really important to have a consensus budget going to town meeting, which is in May. It's easier for the town residents to understand what's going on, if everyone's on board. A consensus budget in May is critical. But to me, it's January 28th. We're going to vote on this on February 4th. I don't think having a consensus budget right now is critical. I think what's critical right now is that we provide a budget that's going to provide for all of our students. And there's plenty of time to get to consensus between now and May. And I just fear that, some of the scuttlebutt you hear is that, they're putting a lot of pressure on the school committee to get down to that 2.5%. I don't think that's our responsibility right now, folks. I think at some point it may be, And, you know, it's no secret, obviously, I'm not running for re-election, so I probably won't be here. I know it won't be here when that happens. I mean, if,
Big writing.
no writing campaign. If nominated, I forgot the expression is. But anyways, my point is, you know, we should keep on fighting for our budget and our kids and making sure they have the resources because, you know, these kids only have one shot at third grade, only one shot at fourth grade. The last thing I want to say is, and I don't know, Jim, if you put slide 2 back up, if you're able to do that. It was slide 2 of your presentation. You can. And, you know, I know Mr. Callahan used the expression a lot, a larger conversation needs to happen. I heard that, which, get that second slide up there, Jim. The last part there, needs support of the entire community to help fund the long-term plan. A larger conversation. These are all euphemisms for an override. That's what that is. So, you know, and I've heard it from, you know, some other elected officials, some appointed officials in town. I think that if that's what they mean, they should come out and say it. Because you're right, Bill's right, that sentence is correct. The community, if we're going to keep on funding our schools the way we fund it, at the bare minimum, we're going to need an override. And people need to start talking about that. And if the town managers refuse to talk about it, you know, it's shame on her and the Board of Selectmen because they're putting this off.
If I can interject, I do feel that I heard that at the Finance Committee meeting
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah.
Okay.
on Monday
Okay.
night.
Well,
or Tuesday.
okay, I get that, but you know, so what would make me feel better about going to 2.5% this year, you know, this letter that was sent to us doesn't reference it at all, Madam Chair. So
Okay.
put it in writing then, that, you know, we commit to the Board of Selectmen and the town manager commit to asking the town for an override this fall or next spring. Because that would make me feel better than these commitments, you know, that as much as I'm sure they're well-intended, you know, you can't always I forget that expression too, the pave with good intentions, what's that one? I don't know.
Oh, pay the road, paved with
yeah.
good
Yes,
intentions.
you know what I'm talking about. Someone help me out here,
Hell
come
is
on.
paved with good intentions.
We need the Bowden guy on the
That's it,
phone again.
yeah.
Anyways, I just think that we should just be honest with people what we're talking about then. Because this 2.5%, I get this one time 2.6 gets us to, you know, almost 7.5%. I understand, but that's only for this year. There's no real commitment after that unless there's an override. So, again, no questions for you folks, but for the school committee, my colleagues, unless I get that kind of commitment in writing and it's publicly said by the Board of Selectmen and the town manager, then I'm not going to support a 2.5% budget. So I thought I'd just kick off to say all that.
Thank you, Mr. Teresi. Can I ask you a question before we go on to the next person? What I heard from you was that you want to see a budget that provides for all students, and I wonder what you feel is missing from what's presented.
Well, that's a very specific question, and I've always said, you know, as a school committee member, when it comes to like the quote-unquote needs of the students, I defer to the administration and the teachers. I couldn't tell you where we absolutely need. I'm not in the classroom every day. All I know is, in my opinion, we have two main jobs here. We hire superintendent and we set a budget. And our responsibility is to set the budget as, you know, what's changed, and I understand what Dr. Gilligan, Dr. Mealy, and Ms. Marks have done. They're trying to be team players with the town manager. I get that. They have to work with them day in and day out. I see our role as school committee members to advocate for the schools. We made a commitment, I thought, last year to a 5-year plan at 4.5% each year. Now, I'm not convinced yet that the revenues aren't there to support this. I'm not convinced what I've seen. I've made my case about underestimating revenues and overestimating expenses. I made that over and over again, and I have not been convinced otherwise. FY21 revenues are still on benchmark. Everything I've heard about FY22 from what I read in the papers and you know, hearing from the state, FY22 I don't think is as bad as she makes out to be. So And I also have an issue, quite frankly, with taking free cash and using it to build, or half of the money to build a fire station. That's money that should be specifically set aside. I mean, free cash to me is money that we've under budgeted every single year. That's what free cash is. It's not like a 5% put to capital every year. It's the money that's under budgeted. So honestly, I just think we've got to keep on pushing forward and forcing the issue. But I know that the 5-year plan that was put forth last year was something we all supported. And I think pushing it out another 2 years, yeah, it makes people feel good. But, you know, so tell that to the first grader who's, you know, been in front of a computer for the last year. You know, it's not right. And, you know, when it comes to government, budgeting is, you know, it sounds like it's a mundane thing, but how you budget is how you value your community. Budget equals values. And by doing this, you know, and again, I'm not going to make any bold stance about you don't support, you know, but we need to show that we value our schools, our kids, our teachers, and that's our role here, folks. And I'm sorry to be a stick in the mud and be a broken record, but that's how I feel about it. So thank you, Madam Chair. I digress too much.
Yep, thank you very much. Okay, Ms. Lynch.
So the recovery money, the $1 million, we'll take that figure, could fund some positions. Are we thinking that would be reading specialists and math coaches? And if so, would they be built into the budget the following year, or not necessarily?
So 2 things. One is one-time money is one-time money. And, you know, that is not built into the base. The most important thing for me is, you know, I'd say that the folks that work for us, our team, like, the most important thing we do is care about our kids and the progress they make academically and socially and emotionally. So I think that there's no bigger sense of urgency than what we need. Now, when there's a sense of urgency, I've seen senses of urgency in districts where there's a sense of urgency, but they're going nowhere fast. And if you looked at the 5-year plan and you were thinking about this upcoming year with 2 special education teachers that were in there, an EL teacher, a social worker, and a reading teacher, I certainly envision that those will be what we will need is portion of the recovery efforts. So no doubt about it. And the most important thing we can do is provide the services, especially next year, for those kids. Now, would it be great for us to come in here tonight and say, hey, we're going to hire 7 of this, 6 of that, 4 of this? I think that that's extremely premature and it'd be irresponsible. I think that we will get the data and find out where kids are, because we have kids making progress every day now. You know, it's been a challenging year, but we have to know exactly where they are, so what those needs are, so that we can put a thoughtful plan together. Do I have any doubt that those positions that were already in the 5-year plan will probably be part of the recovery piece? 100%. So, you know, to me, the most important thing with a sense of urgency is getting the right folks in there to support the kids for the needs they have coming up.
So just to add, it was discussed at FinCom the other night and in discussions with the town manager that everyone anticipates it's not just next year that's going to need some funding for recovery services, but coming year. So I would think that it's going to be kind of a blending of one-time expenses bridging to the money being in the operating for those positions going forward.
But we don't have that commitment.
Well, we do for next year. But
I know, but I mean for the following years.
We're not approving a budget for any year after that right now, but certainly everyone is expecting that there'll be a need and is committed, at least verbally, to meeting that need.
And they did discuss it at FinCom. The town manager did discuss that there could be one-time recovery funds in the following fiscal year that would also come from one-time funding free cash.
Okay. All right. I mean, where I come down is I agree with Kathy Koch and David that we need to have a bigger sense of urgency. And I do think, on the other hand, I do see the value of cooperating with the town and trying to do the right thing going forward. But I tend to agree with David that we approved a 5-year budget last year, and I feel like we're just pushing that off, and to the detriment of the kids who need stuff now. I like the idea of the free cash and the 2.6 million helping out. But again, that doesn't become part of the budget, so I don't know.
So my comments are very, if I wouldn't mind going, my comments are very similar to, or my questions are similar to yours. So, and for those of you who did, I thought, I know you participated, I think, watching the FinCom the other night was extremely helpful to me to understand, A, the processes, especially with the free cash. And a lot of it was toward making sure that we're ready to finance these buildings and things like that. She also explained why we have so much free cash all of a sudden, in the last 2 years, which was helpful. I can't reiterate it now for you, but it was a very helpful thing to participate in, or to watch. I wasn't participating. But I was coming around to the same thing that kind of Holly was asking. So to me, the most important thing is the 7-year plan, the 5-year plan that we all were behind starting this past year. And now we've hit a snag, and we're trying to find a way to be good partners to bridge the gap between this year where things are a little bit unknown, but getting right back onto the plan next year. And I was seeing it kind of the same way Holly laid it out, which is this 2.6 recovery money is basically paying for those positions now and then putting it in later. And if you looked at now, your projection for the next year is bigger than it was even last year, because we have to then add those in, and the OPEB, which I'm still very interested in pursuing. And I was on that committee pursuing, do we really need to be putting all that aside? So all of that is around to say, because I do see kind of what Bill Callahan was getting at, and exactly what you said, David, and it did come up, and Helen, you started to say this. It came up pretty clearly in the conversation with the FinCom the other night, is that everybody recognizes that we're not going to just be able to use the monies in our town to move all these plans forward. There's going to have to be something done. There's going to have to be the big word used. I mean, that was acknowledged.
Word that shall not be named.
Yeah, so.
I have never heard it in public.
No, but it was, I thought it was pretty transparently referenced, which I felt really good about. But I want to make sure that as a community, we all get behind the long-range plan you've put together. And I worry, based on the last couple of years of special town meetings and town meetings, when things kind of felt like they were getting pushed through fast, and people were brought out to vote, and I'm not even sure they knew what they were voting about. They were voting against something or not necessarily for something. I don't want to set us up to not have built the right people behind to support this and then trash the whole plan because of something that we're not willing to work through this year, especially if we can still get what we think we need to get through this one-time expense. So, and maybe I'm naive, and I would love to hear you guys correct me, but that's kind of where my mind is going right now.
Thank you, Ms. Mabley. Mr. McDevitt, you want to get in?
Sure. So I feel very similar, I think, to how the rest of the committee feels with this. And I think Mrs. Mabley kind of stole a little of the thought process that I had with this. I think I said last week, the possible COVID-related expenses that are there, I really need some more information about them. And I met with Mrs. Marks earlier today to kind of go through some of that. But I do, again, continue to feel like this needs to be in the operating budget. And I appreciate the fact that the town manager is saying that the funds will come from free cash, but that's only if they are approved at town meeting. If they are not approved at town meeting, then we are here with none of this.
That's
Good point.
That's a very good point.
None of this. This doesn't happen at all. So I'm not behind this still. I think the other piece that you put out there, Dr. Gilligan, was you said, we can't just say, hey, we need, 7 reading specialists and 10 math, or, whatever those numbers are. we have the data, we're getting the data, we're formulating and doing all of that, right? And that's great. That number may be $1 million, and that may be higher, and it may be lower, and we don't know what that number is until the data is there. And so I think with that in mind, I really support Mr. Teresi's comment of, why do we have to approve what this is when we are putting the education of our students and our community because of a February 5th or an 18th deadline? Like, that to me just seems completely wrong. I would much rather blow past a calendar date than do the educationally right thing. And then the other thought that I had, which probably sounds a little bit silly, but when I look back, and correct me if I'm wrong, part of the proposal for next year is 5 teachers at the high school?
Correct.
Okay, so that's 5 teachers at the high school if we move off of the trimester schedule to the semester schedule. Is that correct?
It's 5 teachers at the high school based on trying to create a schedule that better serves kids.
Okay.
So it could be, and part of it is possibly looking at leaving the trimester schedule.
But is it 5 teachers no matter what?
It's 5 teachers if we were going, we had looked at between, and you can go back several budgets, we've been looking at between 5 and 7 teachers at the high school to go to, more of a traditional schedule with more periods.
Okay. So here's the thought process that I have on this, and excuse me, I would love to hear perhaps from some teachers or administration at the high school for this. I'm not going to say that, we need to go off the trimester or do all that, and NESCAC has, in theory, kind of, I think they planted the seed that recommendation was going to be coming. There isn't a mandate that it has to happen by a particular date, is it?
Typically, looking at the high school schedule, we look to bring it to you guys in, this spring, because there is.
No, from NESDAQ.
Oh, NEASC.
NEASC, I'm sorry.
That's their recommendation, yeah.
Okay.
So, but there's other factors.
Is there a deadline for it?
No. It's
Okay.
simply their recommendations.
So here's the thought process that I have on this, and I don't know. If I were a teacher at the high school, and maybe they'll tell me differently. Last year, I started my year, everything was great. I hit a wall on March 13th. I pivoted, I switched, I completely changed a million things that I was doing over the course of the spring. Summer, had somewhat no idea exactly what was going to happen as we negotiated until the 11th hour to try to get schools reopened. We then kind of said, okay, great, it's going to be, cohort A, cohort B, you're going to switch this, but be ready to change at a dime in case these COVID numbers kind of go up. So these teachers, again, have had a rough year. I mean, it's been more predictable because of, I think we've been in school an awful lot. But from their perspective, they're working extremely hard for students that are home, that are in their classroom, the remote days. Now whatever it was, a week, 2 weeks ago, moved over to these 20-minute periods. Mm-hmm. They're rechanging everything. And now, if we're thinking about this, we're going to say to these high school teachers, okay, I know you've been teaching biology for a long time and you've been on the trimester. Guess what? Year 3, we're going to throw you a massive curve, and now you've got to switch and pivot everything to this. So from that perspective, like, if they tell me this is absolutely what we want to do, then that's fine. But from my perspective, that's 3 very major significant changes to their working situation right here. I would take that 420, if I'm reading the number correctly, or
310.
310. Okay, all right. On my chart, it's in there twice. I would take that, and I would probably keep that in the budget, but that would not be for high school teachers. And maybe that's reading specialists, and add that to the $1 million or whatever that number needs to be. But I would not, and I can tell you right now, I am not in favor. I may be in favor of moving to a semester schedule. I do not believe right now I am in favor of it for next year. So I would take this and put this in on where we need to supplement, where we need to help these kids make up for the time that they've lost. And then it's in the budget moving forward year to year.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be happy, especially on the 4th, to bring in the high school folks to talk about that. A lot of this has been teachers involved in the process, but certainly very good points.
I actually hear what you're saying, Mr. McDevitt. I guess one key thing, you said it'd be helpful to hear from the teachers, but it would be also helpful to hear that the teachers, what if they said the best way to close this gap that we've gone through in the last year and a half would be to change the system? Maybe it would, but it would be important to hear.
I need to hear that.
Exactly, understand that.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
So thank you, Mr. McDevitt. Thank you, Ms. Mabley. And I would say a few things, and I'll start by talking about the high school. We have done very little at the high school for a very long time. And if we want to talk about gaps and difficulties, we've had some at the high school for quite a while. Whether it's a change to a semester schedule from a trimester schedule, I mean, I'm not in that discussion, and I think that there's very few things more complicated than a high school schedule. But I'm not interested in talking about the best needs of teachers at this point. I'm interested in talking about the best needs of students. So that's where I stand on, whether or not we need to address the high school. I've been talking about addressing the high school since I have a 24-year-old. It's been a long. I would like to speak with regards to OPEB. I wonder, because our town seems to do the kind of funding that ends up with a bucket of money in free cash, if it would make sense for the school's OPEB liabilities to be paid out of free cash at some point in the future. It doesn't seem like that would be possible this year, but it might be possible in the next fiscal year if we're anticipating bringing free cash down to 2.5 mil and then getting 5 or 6 mil from Amazon, that perhaps 3 of that could be put towards those OPEB liabilities for all those positions that we've named in our multi-year plan. I'm not going to refer to it as the 5 or 7 year plan. I'm just going to call it the multi-year plan. So that would be my suggestion that obviously doesn't belong in this room. It obviously belongs with the town manager and with the Board of Selectmen. When we talk about not getting money approved at town meeting, I think that we're at a big risk if we go in asking for 4.5% in the operating budget without the revenues to make a structurally sound budget. If we're going to use one-time money for operating expenses, that's a structurally unsound budget. And we might be able to get enough people in the room on the floor of town meeting to make that change, but our town manager and our Board of Selectmen are not going to let stand a structurally unsound budget. And so what that would mean is that we would see, I believe, an immediate shift in massive cuts to the other town departments. I've seen this happen in North Andover before, and I think some of you have been here long enough to see that too. I don't think having that kind of fight on the floor of town meeting is going to benefit us for our long-term goals to have capital improvements and the operational override that will be required to support the positions that we need to add, unless there are significant changes in the revenues, such as the funds from Amazon. So I have to agree with David that there, and also with at least one member of the FinCom, who suggested that the town borrow now for capital improvements and keep that free cash available, because down the line, borrowing might be more difficult than it is right now. Right now, we've got AAA bond ratings. Right now, interest rates are very low. So we might be able to take that on without having a debt exclusion override, so that we can then use that free cash to start some of the stuff that the schools are planning to start in the next few years. So that's where I stand right now on this budget and with some of the thoughts that we've exchanged.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
It's David again. So first of all, I agree. It's always great to go to town meeting with a consensus budget. I think it's important for the citizens to see, you know, the primary elected officials and appointed officials in the FinCom on the same page. My only point I'm making is we're not going to town meeting tomorrow. We're not going to town meeting.
I get it.
So we should keep on pounding away. And the reason I'm pushing for public acknowledgement from the town manager and the board of selectmen for an override is the simple fact that no override can appear before the voters unless they vote for it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's you need 3 votes for a general override and 4 votes out of 5 for a debt exclusion override. So it starts with them. And again, we need to stop with the code language. We got to start building the case. And we all doing this together. But you know, there's an election this year coming up. There's 2 seats on the board of selectmen. This question should be front and center. Well, remember, college should be maybe front and center as well. But this should be front and center on how we're going to pay for their schools. So I like to think that I think we're getting to the same place. But again, that's where I'm going to be next week when we vote, unless I see a 4.5% increase, something in writing from the town manager, the board of selectmen, they're going to support an override. Thank you. And for the record, the last time we had one was 2007. 2007. Man, again.
And we had some failed ones before that.
Oh, we had a lot. Yeah, I got a whole list of them.
Yeah, and that's I don't want to.
You know, and the conversations that we had, certainly at our tri-board meeting and at the FinCom meeting, is that the work of our subcommittee to bring forward our space needs is what's going to gain those commitments to work towards whatever funding we're going to need, whether it's an override or borrowing money for the capital. And then those capital spaces drive the operational expenses. Okay. Are we done with that discussion for tonight? And we'll take it up again at our next meeting?
Yeah. Can't wait.
Okay. And so we have new business. We have the first reading of the 2021-2022 school calendar. You may remember that this has in the past been done in March or April, and that there was a request that it be done earlier in the year, so it is now January. And the first draft is available to us. I can't see what's being projected, but it looks like Jim is getting that draft calendar up. And Dr. Gilligan, is somebody on your team want to address the main features of this?
Yes, certainly. I think the font's a little small. I think I need some new glasses here. However, you know, I think what I know from historical perspective is, you know, every 3 years we negotiate a new contract with the Teachers Association. And it's always difficult, I think, on the negotiation year when you're starting up that first year about the start date and whether Labor Day's late or whether Labor Day's early. And are we going to start after Labor Day or before Labor Day? So if my memory serves me correctly, because I'm having a hard time seeing from here, Jim, so I might ask you for the dates. But it looks like Monday, August 30th, tentatively would be scheduled as the first day for teachers, to be in the 30th and the 31st, which would be Monday and Tuesday. Typically on years when Labor Day falls when it does, that Wednesday and Thursday, by contract, would allow for students to come in, and then a 4-day weekend, and students returning on Tuesday after the Labor Day.
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So if I read this correctly, students go back on, well, 1 through 12 go back on September 1st, Wednesday, and they get out on Wednesday the 15th if there are no snow days. So I'm going to ask the question that my 4th grade asked me the other day. Are we ever going to have snow days again? Now that we have all this remote technology, are we going to have snow days?
You could have power outage days.
We'll have power outage days. We'll have power outage days, and you know,
but you,
Dave, I'm not sure what DESE is going to do with a few things. You know, some things I think that I know they're going to do,
yeah,
and they do something different. So that's the honest truth. I think we'll be waiting on that, but there's certainly, if that is allowed, it would be probably more of a power outage day.
Because my again, initial reaction is, because, I feel like we should go back after Labor Day, is if all we're getting those 2 days in before Labor Day, the 1st and the 2nd, we could just extend that week to the last day being the 17th, unless I'm missing something wrong. I mean, that's why I look at it, but.
So I think that's an interesting question, and, I was part of the negotiation team with the union, my God, it seems like forever ago. Was it last year?
Spring.
It was last
You said 11th hour. I think it was more like 1 a.m., Andrew.
Yeah.
This one was in the
I don't know.
This one was in the spring.
And, at the time that we did it, and if you've been part of the interest-based bargaining, one of the things is, there's an interest to get the kids out earlier in the summer, right? And so, what does that look like? And when we look at the calendar for that, and potentially adding 5 snow days in there, that brings us out to whatever that is, the 22nd of that, right? And
Yep.
so that, as we looked at it at that point in time, it was long, it was late, it's hot, all of those things that we all know about the summer. We made the change to, and I would have to check the wording of this because I don't remember it exactly, that it is no earlier than the 30th for teachers to return, with a anticipated date probably of students on that 1st, because Labor Day is relatively late this year. But I think we would have to check what that contract states, what the actual verbiage of that is, and I think it would be, we would have to we could potentially have to renegotiate with that with the teachers, but I don't think we know what the possibility of snow days are either here. So I see both sides of this. I'm more in favor of going back after Labor Day, being part of the negotiation team and kind of understanding kind of the process that we went through with that. No one thought we'd be here where we are today. And it was like, all right, great, we'll be out by June 15th. We're pretty good there. I think now if there's really no snow days, or there's 2 conceivably, not 5, it could be something that the teachers could be in favor of, and the parents and the community as well. I don't think it's a bad thing to start to look, but I don't know what we're going to do with snow days either. So, maybe a check-in with the union on, whether or not that could make sense or not. I don't know.
I'd agree, Andrew. I was just, actually, while you were doing that, I was pulling up the language.
Okay.
So the start date for the teachers in years 2 and 3 of this agreement, and this would be year 2, will be August 30th, and in 2021 would be the first day, which would be the Monday. New personnel may be required to attend prior to.
27.
And then school will not be in session for teachers or students on the Friday prior to Labor Day. In no event will teacher work year be longer than 4 days.
Does it specifically say when students are in?
Students' instructional year will start no later than the Tuesday following Labor Day and terminate no later than June 30th.
Okay. So
I think this is a good first read with some good questions.
Yeah, so that.
Well, let's make sure that we hear from everybody on the committee before we move on.
Yeah, but that could be, it says that the teachers return on the 30th. It's not no earlier than the 30th. It's will, right?
Yeah, the work year for the teachers will begin on.
Okay.
So there are 3 dates that you could start school on: the 1st, the 2nd, or the 7th.
Right. Because it says the students will start no later than the Tuesday after Labor Day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that would be a conversation, if we're going to explore, we should have some conversation with the union on that.
Ms. Lynch?
I don't have any questions right now.
Ms. Mably?
My only comment is we spent a whole lot of time last year talking about this exact thing, and with the understanding that this was going to project for this year and next year as well. I think the only thing that makes it different is this whole snow day thing, and as we know, some parents think snow days are great. I don't think we could go to 0 because we have had power outage days required in the past. But, I mean, there's nothing wrong with looking at, I personally love to start after Labor Day, but I don't love going to school until the 22nd of June.
Right.
So,
Well, or the 24th of June, if we were to start after Labor Day.
right, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good point.
So, yep.
I would say that I recall getting a number of comments over the years that the end of summer is a challenging time for families because a lot of activities have closed down, a lot of childcare opportunities have closed down, and they don't have a lot of choices. Not that schools are about childcare, but there was a preference to have a start that was before Labor Day from some families. I think if we're to have conversations with the union about this further, I think we might need to open the door and have conversations with the community more. And I don't think that either of these start dates is going to make everyone happy. So my recollection of last year was that the direction that we were going in was to start before Labor Day. So that would be my inclination at this point. But we do have time, and we would welcome public comment. That this will be on our agenda next time we gather.
So, Madam Chair, you expect to take a final vote on this next Thursday?
We can. We'll have our second read. We can wait if we want.
So, Madam Chair, if
There
I,
was a desire last
That's
time
right.
from our teachers
Right.
to have this decision made earlier in the year.
Yep.
So if there were
That's
a
what I was
reason,
gonna say.
if it were the will of this body to wait, our next meeting is February 25th, after February 4th.
Let's see what the public
I was
comment.
ready to vote, but
I think it's important, like you said, to hear from the teachers and the community, and if we get enough input in the next 7 days, then we'll take a vote, but I think it's definitely having on the agenda next time just keeps it in front of the people, so for the 5 people who are still watching us now, let your friends know.
Yeah, no, and I mean, having this discussion does give us more time to make the decision. If we're having this discussion now, and we don't usually have as you say, a 7-day turnaround, even if we make the decision at the end of February, we're still a full month before we even started talking about it last year. And I think we made the decision in April last year. So it's good that we got it queued up to have the conversation now. So that's our last agenda item, and we usually have a go-around in case any members want to share anything with the community of their work with the committee. Mr. Teresi, do you have anything to share?
Nothing school. I just want to actually give a shout out to a mutual friend of most of ours, Heidi Waters, who is taking it upon herself to put these beautiful signs out around town, just inspirational quotes and stuff that she put on my lawn just the other day. It's just like a nice thing to do. So I was just thinking, if more people were as thoughtful as Heidi, we'd be in a much better place. So I just want to publicly thank Heidi for all she's doing to just make North Andover a better place to be. Thank you.
It's poetry called Live Their Words.
Well, I have one on my lawn now, and I think it's great. And it's unfortunate that she's got someone stealing some of them or something like that. It's kind of crazy, but she's persistent.
Thank you for that shout out. Ms. Vitsky Lynch.
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, Mr. McDevitt.
Nothing right now.
Okay, and Ms. Mabley.
I just wanted to reiterate, I really appreciate our team who speaking at the Finance Committee on Tuesday, and I thought you made it very clear that we need what we need now, but we need what we need over the next 5 years, 7 years, and I appreciate that. And I also appreciated the very thoughtful questions that the Finance Committee people asked during that meeting. So I think it's going to take this kind of partnership and really listening and asking the questions across the board. And I hope that they've paid attention to our conversation here tonight.
Thank you very much. So with nothing further, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
So I believe that was moved by Mr. McDevitt and seconded by Ms. Mabley.
Correct.
Correct.
And our go-around, Mr. Teresi,
Yes.
Ms. Vitsky Lynch,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt,
Yes.
Ms. Mably?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. It is 9:51 on the 28th of January, 2021, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.